Okay, welcome everyone to the October 1st New York State Council on Hunger and Food Policy meeting. I'm Kate Fulham. I'm a team lead within the Agricultural Development Division within the Department of Agriculture and Markets. This group is chaired by our commissioner, Richard Ball, who's here in Albany, and will be addressing you shortly. Again, the meeting is being recorded. We have some on-site help in Albany from our wonderful science policy fellow from the Rockefeller Institute of Government, Ashmita. So you could just wave. Thanks for being there and helping contribute to this group. For our panelists, you'll see yourselves on the screen, and you can feel free to raise your hand to contribute to the discussion. Because we're virtual and in person as a hybrid meeting, we'll just ask folks to signal that you want to contribute, and we'll mute and unmute to keep the background noise level down. We also have a chat feature for any members that want to provide updates. You could also, for the in-person folks, just provide that to Ashmita, and we'll circulate links and resources following the meeting. We know there's a lot going on right now, lots of events, resources, updates, so please provide those to us. For those viewing online, thanks for joining us. We have a Q&A feature, so if you do have questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A feature, and we'll try to address them as we can. And just want to go through our agenda format for the day so that we have a big picture of what's going to be happening. So if you could advance to that slide, Kendall. We're going to get started in just a moment with opening remarks from Commissioner Ball. Obviously, top of everyone's mind is the impacts of our federal policy shifts and funding cuts. We're going to have some discussion at the top of the meeting related to that, and then re-examine our discussion questions within the context of each of our 4 work groups. So you'll see the 2 work group sessions before the break. We'll have a 15-minute break at 11:30, and then have 2 more work group sessions before we conclude with next steps, closing remarks, and adjourn the meeting for 1 p.m. For those in Albany, we do have a little snack prepared, New York State apples. So if you need a break, feel free to get up and have some refreshments anytime. And same for those online. And with that, I will pass it off to our commissioner and chairperson for some opening remarks. Just for online, we are unable to hear. So just a moment, let's test that mic.
This one is green. You don't have one by you.
Now we can. Go ahead, Commissioner. Thank you.
I have to start all over again. Thank you, Kate. I have to say, Kate and the team, Kelly, and all you folks down in New York City have put together a pretty amazing agenda here, which is it's going to be exciting. It's going to be kind of deep, a little bit heavy today. I think we've got a lot of things to contemplate. But thank you for such a great agenda, and thanks to everybody here for showing up here and making this a very cozy room. I mean, I'm thinking we need to move to the Empire Plaza. We're going to keep having this success, and the need for us to collaborate here. But having creative minds in a room and having collaboration in one room, it's never been more important than it is today. So speaking of challenges, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more with this agenda. Lauren's going to bring us up to speed on some things. The governor is speaking right now in New York City on this subject. So we'll pass that along as that evolves. But again, thank you for being here. My 94-year-old mother reminds me pretty regularly when she turns on the news in the morning that they say good morning, and then they proceed to tell her why it isn't. So I think the importance of collaboration, today has never been more important, as I said earlier. We are getting a little bit fatigued, I think, with the everyday do something. And that's pretty much across the spectrum, not just in the hunger and food policy world, but across agriculture and across all the businesses in the country. There's a fatigue going on. But I think that, you know, the way we get through this is to stay together. I think this should be and needs to be the decade of collaboration, because that's how we'll survive this. So we're kind of, I have to focus on a couple of things. One, I've been in Washington, D.C. frequently recently. Was just recently met. Kelly was with us, the other deputies were with us, with all 50 states, talking about the departments of ag. I'm talking about all 50 departments of ag, plus Puerto Rico and Samoa all together, and looking at all the issues you can imagine, trade, tariffs, and food policy, frankly. And pretty sober meeting. But, you know, when we're in Washington, it's very foggy. It's still foggy, transitions are happening. There's some new people coming into USDA, which is encouraging, frankly. But coming home, I'm like feeling very grateful to be coming back to New York, because there's clarity here. There may be some funding challenges. There's going to be some related challenges to that. But we have decades of policy around hunger and food policy. We have this group of people who carry that passion forward. The governor continues to prioritize affordability and access for all New Yorkers to things. Hunger Action Month, wore an orange tie. I hope some of you did, where it's appropriate. Ellie. You know, we got universal school meals. That's pretty cool. We got food access expansion grant program, was able to announce that recently, and that's a pretty cool thing. To see that still going on, to see that level of funding, you know, $5 million to be able to go somewhere to help increase that was pretty. The Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant Program, $13.7 million. That was a pretty good thing. We have our New York Rona certified infrastructure grant money is going out there to help farms put in the right kind of infrastructure to be able to supply food, to reach that level of food safety and environmental responsibility. I was just out in Cortland County the other day, awarding some funding for farms to improve what they're doing on farms and then more environmentally correct thinking. The most biggest pot of money we've ever been able to do for agriculture, thanks to the Bond Act that was passed. By the way, the Bond Act passed with like 70% majority votes supporting that, which is also encouraging. Fresh Connect program, think about the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, the Regional School Food Infrastructure Program. I mean, there's some things we're doing in New York that are encouraging. They're the right things. We need to keep those going. And I know the governor's committed to doing that. And we're going to have some hiccups with the federal government at every step of the way. We're going to talk about that today and dive into that. And of course, I have to go back to the thing that probably in the last decade, we're probably the most proud of, and that's Nourish New York. To be able to connect the food system, to replumb the food system during the pandemic. That has opened up and created connections for that were never there before between farmers and the emergency food system. You know, that's got to remind ourselves that there's some good things going on in New York in the face of craziness. We're also kind of proud that, you know, the federal government in the last administration copied that program to put out LFPA, what we call New York Food for New York Families. And we still have some funding there, which will run through 2026. So we're going to be able to keep doing that, which is great. I think so much has happened, and yet the pressure is still so great. I'm looking at that, Natasha, and realizing that we did all that federally, you know, when we had federal partnerships and statewide, And we still have, the need seems even greater and overwhelming. But I think we work together, we collaborate, we stay in one place, we still have a good story to tell. And I think that's kind of the task that's in front of us, is that, you know, you can drive yourself crazy listening to what happens every 5 minutes coming out of some parts of the country. And yet, we're going to keep doing what we know to be right. There's a tremendous amount of power. I have this on my refrigerator. There's a tremendous amount of power in doing the right thing. Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's uphill, and sometimes you don't have the support I think we need. But I think New York State's been committed to the fight against hunger. Again, this needs to be the decade of collaboration. We will figure this out. We're going to keep going, and we're going to dive a little deeper into all those details. So without further ado, I want to just stop there and turn it over to Lauren Williams, who is.
Can I ask one question before?
No.
No?
Of course.
Can you just talk quickly to let me know, when you read the news, you don't know what's true or not true, whatever, the Argentina bailout of $20 billion going to them while we screw up farmers, is this all true?
That happened. There's quite a lot of there's quite a lot of pushback by all 50 states on that subject. You know, when we were all together, I want to don't go too deep down this rabbit hole, but you know, the tariff and trade issue is very significant. There's going to be an attempt by the federal government to find some pots of money to pay farmers for what they're losing in trade. The point is, in the Midwest, you know, the row crop areas, we grow a lot of row crops here, but most of the corn and soybeans that are raised here are going to feed our dairy animals. But across the country, most of that is exported, you know, 3 out of 4 tons that those products that are raised in Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois, go overseas. And right now their bins are full. They have a record crop, and we have not sold one soybean outside our borders.
Can you just tell me quickly, and I don't want to take too much time on this, that decision for the $20 billion, where did that money come from and how was that decision made? Was that an executive decision? Or, I mean, just all of a sudden one day, I read about our farmers really having problems. The next minute I see we're bailing out for $20 billion, and I never saw a conversation, a discussion. I just saw it reported. I just don't get how that happened with the click of a finger.
It happened the way almost everything happens in Washington today. That was not discussed by the 50 states at any point. That was done at the White House. So those are concerns that we all have. You know, later this month, the secretaries of the states of Mexico will be meeting with the commissioners, secretaries, and directors from the United States, and also the ministers of agriculture from Canada. We can talk about these things, but there's quite a bit of concern across all 50 states with that regard. It happened at the White House level, and it's not well received anywhere except Argentina.
So, and when you say you get $20 billion, and then we'll try to see where we can find money for our U.S. farmers.
There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it right now, but all the more reason why in New York State, we're going to continue to do the things that we do. We're going to continue to have quite a bit of input nationally. The State Departments of Agriculture are very relevant voice in Washington, D.C. We're nonpartisan. Don't typically write editorials or op-eds in the Washington Post, but weigh in regularly and are sought out. So we're going to continue to do the right thing. I guess is all I can tell you right now. But that was not welcome news in any state or the territories. We're going to keep doing what we do. And Lauren can add a little bit of color to that with the recent updates. Again, the governor's speaking.
Big agenda today. I think, you know, it's important that we are going to have some time after Lauren provides a general update about some of the broad strokes federal policy impacts to kind of flag some of those high level issues and just in essence of, respect of time, to just kind of popcorn around the room, and we'll be recording and diving deeper into some of those issues with our work group sessions. But I think if we can move along to Lauren's presentation and open up for discussion.
Thank you, Kate. Yes. Lauren?
Yep. Thanks, everybody, and good morning. As commissioners kind of hinted at, I think where we are at in terms of federal policy and changes, lots of impacts that have been occurring, especially we'll primarily focus on some of the things that we saw in HR 1 or in those, but also wanted to acknowledge that there have been changes and contract cancellations to various important programs that we utilize here in New York State, and definitely keeping those in mind as we look and have discussions as a council. And I know folks on the camera or on the virtually will be able to see this, but and happy to share more information. But I think, the big one right now as we, look at from a state perspective is HR 1, the one big beautiful bill, the big ugly, however you want to describe it and whatever terms you want to describe it, was signed by the president on July 4th. Primarily, I think for New York State, some of the, the big changes are coming to SNAP, and those will trickle down to the state, how we spend funds as a state and what that may mean for constituents in New York. And just wanted to go through an overview so we're all on the same page of what we kind of see those changes and how we interpret them is that, there's work requirement changes for able-bodied individuals. They expanded who fits in that definition. It used to be 18 to 56. Now it's all the way up to 64. And some of the waiver requirements are changing for states on the availability of, what's the availability of jobs, SNAP eligibility for non-citizens. So whether, they have legal permanent resident status, different classifications for, Cubans, Haitians, and others. So those are changing. The SNAP and the low income home energy assistance program, those are changing as well. Some changes to the Thrifty Food Plan, SNAP Ed, that funding was eliminated. Fiscal year 25, those funds can still be spent, and they'll have till next end of next fiscal year. But I think that's a major blow to New York, and we'll have some folks here to talk about that program more specifically. And then, of course, the state share is changing both from the administrative side as well as the benefit side. So wanted to just flag those overviews, and we'll dive deeper into what that might mean for New York State. But also did want to flag, that there, have been some positives or what some, groups have messaged as positives for the agriculture industry, including some Farm Bill program extensions for commodity programs. And those are mainly your row crop programs, but there's also some dairy coverage, specialty crop funds overall are increasing. We don't know if that'll trickle down to New York State, but there were also some reallocations of funding and re-up of funds for TFAP. And also flagging for, businesses, there was also some tax extensions. So again, depending on how you look at it, there's a mixed bag for folks in terms of, what some benefits or some definite negatives that are coming out of there. And of course, Medicaid, as we talk about food, we also have to talk about healthcare coverage and how that's impacted. And so there could be changes to the essential plan in New York State Medicaid coverage. So following that very closely just to see, do individuals lose their coverage? Are they going to be paying more? So keeping that in mind as we talk about the whole holistic system of changes. And we had kind of the next possible, what we had put in, as we were putting these points together was, what else can Congress do? I would say nothing as of yesterday, but that's very cynical. So we are in a government shutdown. You know, the Republicans and Democrats failed to reach an agreement, you know, mainly hinging on healthcare because of the impact that folks are going to feel. So we are kind of, you know, and if folks are interested, USDA released their lapse of funding plan yesterday that kind of describes, you know, how in which programs will continue. You know, SNAP is expected hopefully to be able to use funds for October. I think, you know, as we get further down the road, there becomes questions of what's left in the bank and how do those funds continue to be reimbursed or get extended to folks. Also questions about how long, you know, WIC funds may be available. You know, there may be the use of existing funds, but no new funds are coming into the program. So flagging that for awareness. And then just on the, you know, USDA farm side, you know, a lot of those programs are either going to cease or it's just kind of a streamlined approach for some existing programs. Food safety, always want to stress that those are continuing, those are priority for food safety inspections and other, you know, life-sustaining programs. Question of whether or not we're going to see a mini farm bill and what provisions may be included in there. Would there be further SNAP changes? Would there be further, you know, ag-related programming? And then I just wanted to acknowledge, as Commissioner said, all of this hanging out there with trade and tariffs continues to be a concern, and whether or not folks have markets for their crops. You know, there's a question of, you know, the president has said they're going to use tariff revenues to help offset farmers that are impacted. Question of whether or not Section 32 will purchase additional U.S., you know, oversupply of crops, be it apples or other products to put into food assistance programming remains to be seen. But just throwing that out there in terms of, you know, different things or requests we may see from organizations. Switch to the next slide. And I think, you know, we're still waiting. While all this passed in HR 1, we're really still waiting for USDA to issue guidance to states on how all these changes get implemented. And I did want to acknowledge, we have some folks here from OTDA who are implementing, you know, these changes once they get guidance. So, you know, any technical questions, we'll be happy to defer to them. But again, right, just waiting on, you know, the work requirements, the SNAP share for states in terms of both administration and benefits. And I think this map kind of shows where USDA has really, you know, outside of the HR 1 provisions, is looking at, you know, granting waivers for states to ban certain types of food purchases under SNAP. You know, the main focus has been sugary drinks, candy, and the states that are highlighted in green have requested and received waivers. I think the question becomes of, you know, not only does that impact retailers, but how does that impact individuals who, you know, are purchasing different items for various reasons? And I think a lot of this we see categorized under the MAHA or Make America Healthy Again approach. And, you know, while acknowledging there are certain provisions under that in terms of, you know, how do we get healthy foods to individuals, there's also how do we carry that out in a way that makes sense while we're still providing food to those who need it. And I just throw up a short list of other USDA actions that are kind of, you know, we hear that we're keeping track of. And this is not exhaustive just because there's been so many changes, but I think the big one is USDA, and this is their terminology, terminates redundant food insecurity survey. So that's just the kind of messaging we're hearing in terms of not only on, you know, food insecurity, but how they view surveys. You know, we've seen surveys on farm worker labor wages being removed as well. So just kind of trying to keep track of what all is happening. USDA does have a rulemaking open right now on the updated staple food stocking standards for retailers. That's currently open if folks want to comment on that. And then I think just highlighting that the farm to school grants are open later than usual, but those are open, I believe, till December for folks to apply. And that's, I think, another dynamic we're seeing is, some programs have gone away. Other programs, as USDA evaluates them, is just extending the timeline in which it's just delayed, in which they're getting out there, and then folks are just, being able to apply is just so much delayed, so it sets everything back. And, as Commissioner had mentioned, LFPA, or New York Food for New York Families, that's a program that's going away. I did just want to flag that there's federal legislation, both in the House and Senate, that would create a permanent program. It's under a different name. It's called the Local Farmers Feeding Our Communities Act. But wanted to flag that, as we see some of those programs ending at an agency level, folks are raising their voices to say, hey, that program has had a big impact in my state. We need to make it more permanent through legislation. And then turning to kind of the impacts that we're going to potentially see here in New York. Just wanted to flag that 2.9 million New Yorkers are SNAP recipients, so 1 out of 7. Just in terms of scope and scale of who we're talking about, potentially 300,000 households expected to lose some type of SNAP benefits. So, far-reaching implications. And, with this shift of potential benefit costs onto states, it's those states with an error rate of 6% or higher. That doesn't become effective potentially until 2027, October of 2027. Wanted to flag that New York's current for fiscal year 25 payment error rate was 12.35%. So again, a potential 1.2 billion cost increase to New York State. And as Commissioner mentioned, I think as we look to next year's budget cycle, there's going to be questions of what holes can or can't we fill as, a state government, and where do we put those funds. Also, the administrative cost shift as well, that's effective next October. But wanted to also flag again, potential $36 million to the state cost, and then potential $168 million to counties. So again, what's the ability not only of New York State, but a local municipality that is probably has lots of other expenses and other things going on to make those up. And then again, SNAP Ed impact with that funding ending is about $30 million annually. And OTDA is going to provide, additional information as, USDA, issues forthcoming, and they already have issued some guidance as well. So, just as things are going out. But again, I think reiterating, what the commissioner has said, we continue to have Nourish New York. We continue to have, other assistance programming that are important. It's just, how does this all fit into the discussions that we have as a council in terms of, where priorities might be. And I know Kate and team put together some discussion questions to kind of kick off just a little bit of brainstorming in terms of, what food systems do you and your organization anticipate in the next 6 months? Are there ideas or opportunities surfacing to address these challenges? What food policy recommendations might help address current anticipated challenges? With all the different groups that you all work with in your various capacities, I think, we're interested in hearing what you're all hearing, and also balancing the realities of, what is the capacity of a state, both in terms of budget and administration, in terms of balancing with the federal government. And,
Lauren,
go ahead, Kate.
Just wanted to step in. The commissioner had said at the beginning, focus and clarity, right? We need to create that clarity in the time of confusion. And I think going to go a little bit off script because we're behind on time. to just say that we should migrate and look through each lens of each work group to explore these questions. There's a lot to tackle, and I think that we can get to a clarity and focus by looking at these questions through each work group lens. So if that sounds good to the group, I think we could gain a little bit of time back and move to our work group discussion. Any objections?
Can I ask yeah, I guess I do have an objection in the sense that I'd like to ask a overall question versus just within the work groups. Is that okay?
Sure.
So I think that one thing that's just kind of been tripping me up over the past several months since the bill was passed is, the cost shares is in a lot of ways the single biggest decision that the state's going to have to make. And I guess fortunately for us, it's not a decision that has to be made today or tomorrow, because of where we are in the sequencing of things. But it's really hard to know what we as a state, or what FoodLink or what the food banks across the state have to advocate for until we start having discussions about whether New York State is going to pick up the tab. I know other states are talking about potentially not picking up the tab on their cost share. So I guess my only question for Commissioner Ball and the rest of the team is, I don't expect an answer today, but when are those conversations going to start? It's obviously a huge decision and a huge amount of money, and I would hope we could start having those conversations sooner than later.
I want to answer that question in terms of the council lens. We do have a food assistance programs work group that focuses in exactly on these types of issues. But Commissioner, if you wanted to answer that, you can as well.
Sure, I'll be pretty brief, Mitch, but those conversations are happening every day. We don't have our head in the sands on this, but we also don't know the depth and breadth and width and height of this. So we're hopeful that there's going to be some clawbacks, that there's going to be some continued discussion at the highest levels. But know that that's being talked about every day.
Fair enough. And thank you, Commissioner. And Kate, the only thing I would just add to your comment, I understand the desire to put this in the food assistance work group. This is my own personal opinion. Others can certainly disagree with me if they'd like to. I don't think there's a single more important program nationally or statewide when it comes to the charge of this Committee of Hunger and Food Policy. I don't think there's a single program that even touches the breadth and importance of SNAP. And so I get putting in a work group, but I think it's just the most important issue for us to think about as a group.
And it won't shock anyone to know I wholeheartedly agree with Mitch's point. New York State is about to lose perhaps up to $10 billion with a B in benefits. So not only do we have to talk about the cost share, I've already communicated with Commissioner Gwynn back and forth about helping people better meet the work requirements. There's been so much focus on state government of Nourish New York, and that's great, but we're focused on programs that deal with tens of millions of dollars worth of foods, and we've really been glossing over the programs that really impact billions of dollars worth of food, including the WIC program, and hopefully we can get later in this agenda to discuss that the administration's proposal to cut $2 million out of WIC outreach that's generating millions of dollars of federally funded nutrition assistance for pregnant women, infants and children under 5. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. We have one more comment here, Kate.
Sure.
So at the risk of echoing what Mitch and Joel said, we're definitely viewing this as a crisis as City Harvest, and it's very difficult to think about any level of state advocacy without knowing what's happening with the 1.2 billion, 36 million. So along those lines, I was curious as far as waiting for USDA guidance, which is what we're hearing about in terms of what's happening sooner, ABOS, asylees, refugees. Is there any dialogue involved there, or are states virtually just waiting for the USDA to say, this is what's going to happen and this is the time? And then the second part of that is, for us, knowing where that impact is happening on, we know statewide what the numbers are, but I'm talking like down the zip code, neighborhood, like that's super helpful in terms of thinking about emergency food distribution, where the, asylees and refugees that are rolling SNAP, where do they live? So on, and as well as the ABOTs as well.
I can speak to that, Commissioner, if that's okay.
Sure.
For the record, I'm Sherry Tomaski. I'm the Bureau Chief in the SNAP Policy Bureau at OTDA. We do have data on the potential impact of the non-citizen changes by district. So we have it at the city level and we have it at the county level. We are waiting for federal guidance on the nuances of this policy. There are some key questions that we can't answer about how some of these changes need to be implemented. But I can tell you that statewide, the estimate is about 41,000 people who are currently eligible for SNAP who would lose eligibility under this rule. They are largely refugees and asylees, as you say. Whether or not those individuals have another legal status that would allow them to continue to be eligible is unknown, and that wouldn't be known until that individual case is screened. These changes we expect will go into effect for new applicants when they're initially certified and for existing cases at recertification. We don't think there will be a full-scale conversion of these changes at one time. So if the case is in the middle of its certification period, they can continue eligibility until their recertification period. For those cases, my guess is they're probably 12-month cases. There could be some 36-month cases if they're elderly. So again, until the federal guidance is issued, there's certain questions we can't answer, which is why we haven't put guidance out. But the city, of course, is where you'll see a lot of the impact, as well as the largely populated counties around the city and in Buffalo. For ABOD, I'm not working specifically on that, but I do think that we have county by county estimates, not only of potentially impacted ABODs, but also like which bucket of change they fall into, because there's several changes in that law that applies the rule to people for the first time and then removes exemptions that people had previously. So we can sort of separate those kinds of groups out and then again, look at what the screening process needs to be for those individuals to determine if they are in fact subject to the rule. Might there be an exemption based on, what the new narrow criteria is, or the medical exemption or unfit for work. And then also we again expect that screening is probably going to need to happen right away. I think we're going to see ABOD probably go into effect, pretty quickly. Our state is currently under a waiver from the ABOD rule through February. USDA has not told us whether or not our waiver can continue until February or if it's going to be rescinded immediately. That is sort of the $1 million question. I think everybody's preparing that waiver will be rescinded immediately and we'll have to implement, right away, but we don't know that officially yet. And the shutdown, of course, is going to really cloud and gray this a little bit because the guidance we were waiting for by September 30th, we never got. So, still a lot of questions, but the employment unit at OTDA is putting together a lot of materials to really focus on how to properly screen and educate clients and build up the, the network of work opportunities that will be needed.
Thank you, Sherry.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks.
So just to kind of level set for the rest of the meeting structure, the council by law is required to put together an annual report. Part of the focus of this meeting, not only to discuss the issues at hand, is to really focus them into recommendations that we can bring forward. In each of our work groups has a work group lead. Some of them are in the room today if you want to raise your hand. And we relied on those work group leads to help develop today's agenda. And through the lens of economic vitality, food as medicine, food assistance networks, and food access programs, we chose to highlight a presentation that was a top of mind issue, again, developed in guidance with those work group leads. We have presentations today about land grant universities and basic science and research that's being done in the name of economic vitality. We've got a presentation about future of nutrition education related to food as medicine and the SNAP Ed cuts. we have a presentation of TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, from our ODS partners. And then we also have a presentation about ensuring equity and dignity for new Americans from our Department of State Office of New Americans. So there are issues obviously beyond that. We could spend days together as a retreat, but I want to definitely get into some of our work group discussions, hear from our presenters, and I want to toss to my co-lead and indispensable Kendall Huff, who helps me lead the council and our team to just do an overview of the work groups, and then we'll get into some of those discussions and presentations.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Kendall Huff. I supervise our Brooklyn team. I did want to answer one question that I received via email and via the chat. Today's agenda, the presentation, as well as the meeting materials and the recording of this meeting will all be posted on our website after the meeting concludes. So Kate sent that agenda out in an email yesterday, but if you did not receive it, please know that you'll be able to view it on our website soon. I just want to set the stage for our work group updates. Just to remind everyone, we have 4 distinct work groups. Our first work group, Economic Vitality, really works to ensure that farmers are thriving and that they can sustain food production in New York State. For Food as Medicine, we're kind of looking through the lens of improving the nutritional quality of the food provided to those in need. Then we have food assistance networks to strengthen connections between supply chains and the organizations who are helping those in need. And last but not least is food access programs, where we're working to leverage public dollars to address the needs of food insecure people across the state. And the format for our work group updates today, each work group lead is going to take about 5 minutes to share the top accomplishments from the 2025 calendar year. After that, we will move into a presentation that, as Kate just mentioned, a guest presentation on the topic that is top of mind for everyone. I do want to remind the presenters to try to keep it to that 10-minute mark since we're a little bit behind time. And then we'll revisit those discussion questions that Lauren prompted us with at the beginning, and we'll look at those discussion questions through the lens of each of these 4 work groups. So I would like to introduce our first work group lead. Julie, I believe you're there in Albany. I have your presentation ready, so after you share your accomplishments, just let me know and I'll advance the slides for you. Julie, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Can you all hear me now? Okay, thank you. Nice to be here. I was reflecting as I drove here. I think this is my 20th year on the Food Policy Council with Ellie, my stalwart friend. So it's nice to be here today. I think it's been about 20 years. At any event, for accomplishments, I'll just be super brief. We had 2 work group meetings. You know, we talked about the challenges faced by the farm community and the cessation of vital nutrition programs. I won't belabor that because we've talked about that a lot already. We also were talking a lot about dairy manufacturing and the growth of dairy this year. Had a guest speaker, Chris Wolf, came in and was giving us some economics update. But while we are extraordinarily happy and pleased to see that dairy manufacturing growth, huge kudos to Ag Markets, to ESD. I mean, incredible partnerships with DEC, obviously the governor to attract all this investment. We also felt, particularly as we have a lot of fruit and vegetable farmers on this subcommittee, that we need to make sure we're also talking about specialty crops, fruit and vegetable, both small scale and large scale, and what we can do as a state to help make sure that we have more outlets for farmer products and can extend shelf life sustainability. So that was one of our recommendations, and we continue to really be curious about how do we assess as a state our competitive advantage? You know, we've always long said our competitive advantage is frankly our water, even though it sounds incredibly hypercritical and insensitive of me to be saying in the middle of a drought that our competitive advantage is our water. But it's true, right? You know, we're not California, we're not over the Ogallala Aquifer, we're not in Texas. And so water is an advantage, but what are our other advantages in New York State and what are our costs? And we don't have a really good comparison or baseline. So that continues to be an issue that our council work group keeps talking about. And I think that's about it. Kate, Kendall, I don't know if you had any other suggestions.
No, we'll actually archive our progress in the 2025 annual report, and work groups will definitely have many chances to have input on that. So we're happy to get into your presentation on the land grant university system.
Great, thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity. And can you pull up my slides, or you should have? Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I am setting my stopwatch because we are late. So I will not only talk quick, I will try to get through this in 10 minutes, I promise. So if you could flip the slide again, I'll skip that. You know, what is a land grant university? And we had this conversation last time. I really appreciate, Richard, that you kind of opened the door and said, you know, a lot of people don't even know what land grant means. And you're absolutely right, because we've been around for a long time and we tend to forget our history clearly. So land grant universities were actually established by the Morrill Act of 1862 under President Abraham Lincoln. So this was quite some time ago, which may be why we've kind of forgotten this, right? So the promise of the Morrill Act, if we remember our history, was that we promised to provide a liberal education with very practical elements in agriculture, also in military science. So Cornell has a military ROTC program and a big veteran-focused effort. So also engineering, a couple other things in that mandate, but our goal was really set forth by kind of one of our founders, Ezra Cornell, to be the institution that allows any person, any study. And so I will proudly say that we have allowed women to study at Cornell Cows since our founding, which sounds a little bit odd to us now, but when you talk to our dean who went to Princeton, he often reminds us that Princeton only allowed women to study in the 1950s, which is kind of crazy. We're also the institution that had the first ever Black scientist get a PhD in botany. Way back in the 1800s. So that any person, any study mission is important to us. But land grant in itself means that the federal government took land from indigenous peoples across the nation and redistributed the proceeds. So we want to be really careful that it's particularly when we work in tribal communities, as we do, that we also recognize that land grant does have a different meaning amongst our indigenous community members. Next slide, please. So Cornell was founded in 1865, which was pretty close to the date of the Morrill Act. And the New York State College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, AKA Cornell Cows, was founded in 1904. So our university was founded. We did do agricultural sciences education in our inception, but our college was founded in 1904. And the really kind of interesting thing is everything in New York is political, right? It was two founders, Ezra Cornell and Andrew White, who were state senators back in the day. And they fought to establish Cornell in Ithaca. That is why we're in Ithaca on, you know, not great farmland, honestly, but that's why we're in Ithaca. And Ezra Cornell did actually give some of his land to our institution as well. And then our founding dean was Liberty Hyde Bailey. For those of you who like history, I know, Richard, you and I both share a love of history and a love of Liberty Hyde Bailey's writings. If you want a book to read, I'd highly recommend New York State and the Farmer. The discussions that they were having back in the day are highly relevant today. What do we need to do as a land grant? We need to be focused on youth education. We need to be focused on ag sciences education. Liberty Hyde Bailey wanted a demonstration farm in every single county. We don't have that. For which, as an administrator, I'm kind of grateful. Keeping that network up would be hard. But we do have a Cornell Cooperative Extension presence in every county. Next slide, please. And I am talking quick, I'm sorry. So after our founders kind of looked at the land grant mission, they thought, okay, we're doing a good job teaching. And this is not just Cornell. Every state has a land grant. I should have been clear on that. Cornell is the only Ivy League, but also public sector, because we are affiliated with SUNY as a contract college. But every state has a land grant. So back in 1887, the mission of the federal government was thinking to himself, okay, we're teaching agricultural sciences, but are we really conducting research in science and innovation? And so the Hatch Act was formed in 1887. We established two because we're in New York. So New York State wanted their own agricultural experiment station in Geneva. And Cornell wanted our own agricultural experiment station in Ithaca. And so we have two agricultural experiment stations. And I don't remember exactly when New York State ceded Geneva over to Cornell to run. I think it was in the 1920s. I'm not entirely sure. but that is a history of why we have 2 agricultural experiment stations, and I'll always be grateful because it gives us more of a presence throughout the state of New York. Established a stream of research funds for agriculture called Hatch Act funds, and that's how we run our remote research farms and also do research in New York. Can you flip to the next slide, please? So here's our land grant footprint. You can kind of see where we are located. We have teaching, research, and extension programs in 16 different spaces and places, and 495 buildings, which is a lot of buildings. We also have forestry and we have environmental sciences programs as well. Next slide, please. So all this is teaching and research, right? But what about translation or extension of knowledge? And so, oh, I think I animated this slide. I'm sorry. Kendall, can you press the button again? Thank you. And you're going to need to press. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, whoops, one more. Sorry. I thought I took the animations off. I did not. So what about extension of knowledge, right? Really important. The Smith-Lever Act passed in 1914, and I have to say extension actually originated in New York State in Broome County, which we're really, really proud of that history, as did, frankly, the Farm Bureaus as well. And so we, in that time, the Farm Bureau and Cooperative Extension were together as home and farm bureaus. And cooperative extension kind of spun off as a separate entity in 1955, but we have a very long history of working with the farm community in New York State. Next slide, please. So I did want to nod to Cornell Cooperative Extension because we've talked about them. You know, we've talked about our research presence. Really important to have that research presence in the different microclimates of New York State. But it's also really important to have our county cooperative extensions. And I think we'll talk about this more later, but the SNAP-Ed transition is going to have a significant impact on our partners. Turn this over to you, Shayna, later, but I did want to nod that it's going to be a challenge for us. You can see the red dots. We are active in every single county in New York State, including New York City and all 5 boroughs. Next slide, please. So I realize I haven't really updated since I've been here for 20 years. What the heck is the Office of Land Grant Affairs? I kind of chuckle over this because I started calling myself an office a couple of years ago, even though it's really just myself and my wonderful colleague Liv, who you can see pictured down there when we were at a Brooklyn event. Liv and I often refer to us as 1.5 people because Liv works part-time and we do our best to steward and preserve and hopefully focus on the land grant mission in New York State. And so, you know, our primary role is to help provide technical and scientific advice to communities across the state, a lot of stakeholder conversations, meetings, hopefully helpful to New York State ag and markets as well as DEC, to try to share the science that we do in ways that are helpful to our communities. And then, of course, I always pivot and say we also do whatever the Dean of New York State throws our way, right? Next slide, please. And I've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to speed through this even quicker. You know, with our Director of Translational Research Programs, we have 15 programs that are primarily statewide applied research and education focused that fall under our vision and our strategic direction. So about 15 programs with 148 staff. Next slide. And so land grant's role in New York State, I will again very, very quickly talk about this. If we wonder the protection of the Adirondacks, acid rain phenomenon was actually something that our college scientists studied, pointed out, we're very active in. We've done nitrogen and phosphorus indexes. We've worked on biocontrol for the fruit industry. Jeff always talks to me about the spindle trellis, right? Improved production. We've commercialized over 270 varieties. We're active in helping NYSERDA and DEC with the climate assessments. That's some of the ways we help provide science. We've been working a lot with soil and water conservation on soil health benchmarks. Of course, farm to school, near and dear to my heart. Our youth education programs with FFA and 4-H. And of course, a lot of workforce training. So I'll skip again. Next slide. Sorry, I often say that CALS is like an octopus in New York State, and I promise I'm almost done. I think one of the most fun jobs I probably am lucky to have one of the most fun jobs on campus because I get to go out and about and speak in a lot of different places. And so when I talk about CALS having tentacles everywhere, I was in Manhattan a couple months ago speaking at a Federal Reserve Bank meeting, and after which time I had people from the Bronx who were looking to establish a food hub who came up to me and said, Julie, I just want to say thank you. The COE has been really helpful to me. And I thought, this is awesome because I'd never met this woman before. And yet she's coming up and telling us what one of our programs is doing to help get food into the Bronx. Then I had another person come up to me and say, hey, this is great. I just chaptered my first ever FFA in Brooklyn. So Richard, thank you, because that urban ag education program is really important and going. So here I'm in Manhattan speaking to a group and people come up to me afterwards. Then we're at the Chobani groundbreaking, and what happens? Hamdi himself says, oh, and Cornell, we have Cornell in New York. This is why we're here. And so, you know, it doesn't matter whether we're in rural, urban communities, we do have these tentacles that are everywhere in New York State. And that is really what we try to do our best to uphold, is to be of service to the state of New York. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. But, you know, I do have to say that we are a land grant. That is a picture of the three-legged milking stool, right? We don't use that anymore. Now you use robotics, you use different, you know, milking equipment technology. But that is the old school days of when we were founded, a three-legged milking stool. And so our funding is really devoted or a result of our state, federal, and community partnerships. And so we are finding that, much like everybody else in the room, we have a choice to make as a state. We have lost over $100 million in funding since January. It's going to be very difficult for us to maintain those tentacles throughout New York State. And so I will simply say that we will continue to do everything that we can to uphold our land grant mission in the future, but it is going to be an interesting choice facing us all. And I don't envy the choices that the governor has, because on the one hand, all these discussions, we have hungry people whose needs need to be met. We have people with health insurance difficulties that are going to become more difficult. But we also have the long-term vision and need to make sure that we do focus on the science that's here to help support our communities in the long haul. The one thing that I know, working for Cornell for 10 years, is that science is really important in the long term, but it's really hard to communicate in the short term. And I do want to convey, we are a little bit at risk at this current moment in time. So that's it for me. And I just have to say, I made it in 10 minutes. Maybe not my most eloquent, but I made it.
That was
Well done,
perfect.
Julie. Thank you.
And I couldn't help but think about what New York State and the dean throw at you. And obviously, you threw University of New York right at Cornell, because such an important partner in connecting and getting the food to those communities, committing to the farmers, helping them find those markets. It's, you know, there's I think, a new and reinvigorated land grant mission here that we all need to understand. And that's how thank you for the pleasant diversion away from what the feds are not doing to what our resources are and assets are. That was a great history lesson.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, Jim.
Could I make just a quick comment? From my farmer hat all my life, I can say that research and science, and I've said it around the table before, but I think we have to keep it fresh in our minds. That science and research each year has results that we use the following crop year. It is an accumulation of many years of research, but the year that stops, we're going to be going backwards in a world that things are changing ever faster. It's remarkable, but it's desperate, and that's going to impact the food supply quicker than you might think. If that science and research slides backwards. So thank you.
Particularly as we look at climate change, and I
Yes.
will say climate change is occurring. And you know, we're going to need to make sure our farmers have more tools as we head into an uncertain future. And I do think it creates a lot of opportunities in New York to grow. This is why you're getting dairy manufacturing coming. It's because we have water. Again, little ironic to be talking about water right now, but we are going to need the science to make sure our farmers have the tools to succeed.
I didn't used to appreciate the Northeast quite as much. It's remarkable, no doubt about it. But when you look at what's going around the world, and even within this country, Senator Hinchy visited our farm about a year ago. and we wanted to show her some of our concerns on a number of issues. But she was the first one to really focus me in. We're in a unique part of the world. We're in a drought, no doubt about it, but there's things we can do to manage. And we are using drip irrigation to this day on the apples that are not harvested yet. But it's going to take the science. We're having to change what we do based on the rising temperatures and how we protect the fruit. It gets burned, and there's things we can do to minimize that. Thank you for bringing that up, Julie. It's an important item.
Thank you.
I'm glad that Jeff spoke up because I was going to invite him to start out on our discussion. So let's continue discussing for another 10 minutes or so some of the challenges and recommendations that we can shape.
Julie, can I ask a quick question? And I don't know, it's a little off track in a second, but as we talk about water in New York, one of the things you keep reading about is as they build out AI and AI and AI, how much water AI uses. So is that an issue that's being looked at in terms of as we try to grow technology, how that impacts the fact that you need so much water as we try to conserve water?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Susan. So I have to say, in terms of the water, I don't know. What I do know is that AI is coming into the agricultural sector. We have a lot of faculty members who are working in AI-enabled technology, specifically around robotics. But what's interesting is that when you talk to our faculty members, I think the current concern that you hear widely reported in the newspapers is AI and data centers consume a lot of power, right? So the power issues of these data centers and massive computers is going to be really difficult in the short term. What our faculty members, however, will also tell you, the ones who are far smarter than I am at this stuff, is that as AI, as a technology advances, the energy needs are going to keep decreasing because we're going to figure out smarter and smarter ways to process everything and to run those algorithms and to decrease our energy usage. So I can't speak to the water issue because I don't really know, but we're kind of thinking that technology, as it keeps to evolving, you know, the use of AI agents itself to do whatever technological challenge you're seeking to enact, the energy usage is going to come down considerably over the next couple of years as technology advances. But doesn't really answer your question, Susan, but that's what I was thinking.
Well, that is an issue I keep reading about in terms of the intensity of the, you know, how much water. And then areas where they're really building big AI centers, they're starting to run out of water. People's wells are going dry.
Just to inject a little bit of levity, I guess. You know, for farmers, AI means lots of things. Artificial insemination, avian influenza, artificial intelligence. But I would inject actual intelligence, which is what we need. That's the AI we need. So it'll be a tool for agriculture. It's not going to be the answer to anything.
I think if I'm allowed to provide some input on the food policy recommendations, the one issue that I think we as a state have not really thought of as much is the need to significantly jumpstart our plant breeding capacity. Because when you look at climate coming, particularly in vegetables and in field crops, we need to make sure that we're developing the varieties that farmers can use to feed us all in the future. And when you look at apples, it takes about 20 years for a new variety. Hops, 10, 15 years or so. A lot of our field crops we can do in shorter time frames. And so same with vegetables, we need to be thinking more and more, not just what does the consumer want, what does the farmer want, but also what are our climate demands going to be in the future. So we just say that plant breeding technology probably needs to be something that we're thinking about. Which again is more long-term and way more abstract, but I'm thinking about, Richard, you planting the vegetables of the future that we are all going to enjoy eating, and we better make sure those crops can keep succeeding in New York.
I'm going to just jump on that a little bit, Julie. Great point. You know, 3 years ago when we started anticipating a farm bill,
Yeah.
you know, the number one concern we heard from the farm community, started with 7, listening sessions, wound up being 8 listening sessions, was research. Research can help us solve the food supply issues. We need better new continuing research. And right now, we're falling behind Brazil, China, and the European Union. We can't be the formerly best research country in the world. We need to keep that research viable. So farmers, Jeff, to your point and to Julie's point, the agricultural community recognized the importance of research. Better drought resistance, better sustainability and varieties, and land, storing better. If we're going to feed more people, we need to be better at what we do. So I think, as you think about recommendations around this particular subject, the research component, which that's what the Land Grant University of New York does for us. And that $100 million of funding that's gone away, that needs to be part of the conversation and a recommendation going forward. Natasha.
I just have a question on the research. Because New York is a strong specialty crop state, and that's good because that's real food that feeds real humans. When we're looking at research in our state, are we really looking at it like by region, by state? Or when you're looking at dollars or efforts invested in research, is it really hit hard on from a federal level and national initiatives? Because geography is so different. So it was just making me think about what is like our fight to make sure that there's funding for the research that we need in New York specifically.
Thanks for
Natasha,
that.
that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I will give you 2 very concrete impacts, one of which I emailed to Richard last night. USDA ARS Ag Research Services is actually shifting their Northeast, formerly Cornell-centered research down to University of Florida. Okay. Our Northeast IPM Center, which has served not just New York, but more frankly, the New England states as well. That funding has now been given to the Southeast IPM Center. So we are seeing massive changes in what the federal government is doing for research funding.
I want
Leave it
to,
at that.
yeah, that's a big concern. I want to add also that when we took all that information from the listening sessions and put it together, the governor put it in a letter and sent it to our congressional delegation. Basically, we underlined that specialty crops. Although, the commodity crops, the program crops, corn, soybeans, cotton, rice, sugar, et cetera, they own most of the land. But when you look at the farm gate income across the country, more than half of it comes from specialty crops. Jeff Christ and I bristle a little bit when people say specialty crops, like it's cute, like it's, a niche or something like that. But that's where the money comes from in agriculture, and it needs to have a bigger place in the Farm Bill. So the Farm Bill recommendations we had made include an emphasis that way. Let's consider that. Let's be aware of that. The funding that comes to program crops is much more significant than what comes to specialty crops. And the research share is unbalanced as well. So that needs to be right-sized in a new Farm Bill.
Well, in relation to the consumer surveys of food pantry guests, the top 3 things that food pantry guests want more of is number 1, meat, number 2, dairy, and number 3, fresh produce, which is all available here in New York. So I think if there's a way to emphasize specialty crop research, and because that is the food that people want in relation to this council
Yeah.
specifically.
I think that's a good idea. I would make a friendly amendment and add dairy. When I say specialty crops, I'm kind of also thinking about dairy, even
Oh,
though
yeah.
that's not included.
Dairy.
in the
Oh,
technical
dairy's
USDA
okay.
definition.
I regard dairy as part of specialty.
Okay.
I think it's important because one thing that's at risk of getting lost here is the Farm Bill. Because so much got cut out of the Farm Bill in this reconciliation bill, which had to happen, I guess. But it lost a lot of leverage for continuing discussions about a Farm Bill, which is really what we need for New York State is the correct, the right size, not a smaller, but a more accurate Farm Bill. That's what we heard. And we're at risk of losing sight of the importance of that Farm Bill being done because of the Reconciliation Act. So I think that's a takeaway here in a discussion and a recommendation. We're not done talking about the Farm Bill. We can't be done.
And the second takeaway that I would just say is, having been on this council for almost 20 years now, is that I really love the fact that in New York, our nutrition sector and our farm sector are still in alignment. And you don't really see that in what happened with the Farm Bill nationally. So I just wanted to point out that that partnership that Richard started us off talking about is super important.
Yeah, that's a lesson from the pandemic, and I think you'd be surprised, a lot of the western states didn't realize it until USAID became a big part of their crop mix.
Yeah.
That this was a population they didn't know was a customer. In New York State, a lot of people didn't realize that people who needed food were customers. And vice versa, frankly.
Great discussion. I think, we've recorded some of the key takeaways here that we'll take into our early November sessions with the work group, and things like climate change, funding basic research and technical assistance for growers, having the data that we need, and promoting some of our specialty crops, dairy, meat production, et cetera, are really important to keeping food production growing in New York and feeding people in need. So knowing that we're going to have further discussions, I think we could move on to our Food as Medicine work group. Ellie Wilson, I think you're in the room in Albany, if you want to share the accomplishments, and then we'll toss to Shayna Russo for a presentation on nutrition education.
Sure, thanks so much. And again, with Julie and our time on the council, as a registered dietitian nutritionist, this has been a transformative opportunity to communicate out through the nutrition community and to build better nutrition capacity in New York State. So I'm forever grateful for the opportunities to be here. Our group goal is to improve nutrition quality of foods provided to people in need. And food as medicine is a particular application, and it's kind of a tiered application of healthier food for everyone from a preventative perspective. All nutrition is preventative, no matter where and when it's applied. But the opportunity here was to look at all the food production in New York State and see how we could empower more of our manufacturers and producers to be able to develop or just even tweak products and support supply chain for food as medicine initiatives. And it's been really awesome to be able to collaborate again with the entities at the table so that we could develop and connect food supply, including retail, including farm, including all of these things. I think it's one of the wonderful infrastructure elements that the council has been able to put together and maintain over time. So what our focus was this year was to help support information so that companies and entities and new business could evaluate the opportunity to be included in and meet the needs of food as medicine systems and also products, et cetera, so that we could ensure that we can support the almost 80% of our, folks, no matter what their economic status, have food-related challenges. So we want to improve that. I'm going to hook my wagon to Julie's on the history element of this. And what many may not realize is how young of a science nutrition is, but we could see it in your slides, right? And in that early 1900s, one of the other organizations that was built primarily out of food service in hospitals and sanitariums was the development of home economics and home food sanitation. That was from the first woman engineer to graduate MIT, and she was specifically headed in one direction, and then she decided to start focusing on this and found her community and developed home economics. And then as the medical elements of nutrition really started to show themselves, the term dietitian was coined in Lake Placid in 1917. And that is the anniversary of the Academy of Nutrition's launch as the accrediting body for dietitians. So we have a lot of history in New York State for this, and I think that is going to be something we should really reach into and keep moving. And it's been something that has really been important to me and important to our profession, working with and across SNAP and so many of our other elements of school nutrition, et cetera. I mean, dietitians in school nutrition in Broome County, Julie Rawe. I mentioned her at one of the other meetings last year, won the National International Food and Produce Association's award for produce education and expansion in school nutrition. So that's one infrastructure element that we can really focus on with this type of work in supporting how do we ensure our food and food quality is both appetizing and nourishing, because that's what it has to be, and safe. There's also been all different pilots, and one of the things that we've definitely seen a great expansion of is capacity for produce purchasing connected to SNAP with Double Up Food Bucks. And that is continuing to expand, and we want to ensure that that also continues. When you think about New York State, and we have our teeny tiny rural communities with their teeny tiny grocery stores, and then all our challenges in, the city is kind of its own world, but not, I mean, we're all connected. We want to make sure that these things continue to be able to deliver for food and health and community in food in New York State. So I'm going to leave that there. We did get some great opportunities with working with Agritech and delivering some resources and connecting them to the New York State Academy of Nutrition so that those programs and businesses would start to have some resources and connections. And we'll continue with that. There we go. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we do have some work yet to do in kosher and halal, but we do have folks working on that too, like Met Council work and things like that. I think there's going to be, continued development in that area too. And
Thanks,
I'm
Ellie.
handing it over to Ms. Shaner, please.
Ashmita, you're going to share Shayna's slides so she can control them. And Shayna, thanks for being here. I know just a little aside while we're getting the slides together and you're moving around. Our team manages the SNAP Ed program. We've been working tirelessly to, receive guidance and guide our different grantees and close out claims and move contracts. It's been a wild ride, and we have had great coordination with OTDA. So thanks to Sherry and Alita, who know are there. We asked Shayna to present so that we could understand what the experience is from those educators in the field, and also shape our discussion of how to continue to advance nutrition education in light of these changes at the federal level. So Shayna, thanks for joining us, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. Are you good at hearing me on your side, Kendall and Kate? Yeah, okay. So this is weird for me to be sitting down at the computer. I'm not usually a sit-down presenter, so I will do my best to stay in one space. So I'm going to be talking about SNAP in New York, kind of winding down and looking ahead. I want to just take a moment and introduce myself. Again, Shayna Russo, I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension. As Julie was given extension shout outs, appreciate that. Particularly in Orange County. I am a mom with a husband and 2 kids. My kids are a lot taller than that now. They're 15 and 12. They're almost the same height as me. I have 2 dogs, Brownie and Cupcake. It looks like I'm running away from all of them, but I actually use the running as a break and a mental space for me, often running to gymnastics practice, and I'm married into a soccer family, and my son enjoys that. So that is who I am personally, and where my heart and soul is. From my personal space, from my professional space, heart and soul, I wear 2 hats. The SNAP Ed project manager for the Hudson Valley region. So for the way we describe Hudson Valley, that's Hudson Valley is 9 counties. And I see Jeff here from Crest Orchards, who's been a phenomenal partner with us. I have an amazing team. We do phenomenal work. But the hat that I'm going to really wear, if I can, I'm also a mouse person for those who like, all right, let's use this one, let's see. There it is the statewide technical assistance coordinator. So Orange County, Cooperative Extension Orange County holds 2 grant projects through SNAP-Ed. One of them is statewide. And the great part about that is I'm privileged to be the liaison between the state agency, OTDA, who we have the leader here with us today, and Sherry, but also the other managers, those who wear the same hats that I do, the educators, we get to talk to them regularly, and the leadership. We are a small but mighty team. And so in the spirit of the day and making sure we stay on track and on time and following Julie's, I'm going to be in the 10-minute space. I'm going to try. So buckle up. This wasn't intentional. I didn't know this was going to happen. But we are going to buckle up and we're going to go back and do a little bit. First, a reflection. I want to make sure everybody knows where SNAP-Ed came from and some of its federal dynamic. And then I want to bring us into the current situation being 2024 to now. And then looking ahead, and that really ties into, I think, the questions posed by Kendall and team. So as we do a time travel, we're not going to get in our DeLoreans. We're going to be quick, I promise. But I want to recognize 33 years of SNAP-Ed. Specifically, I want to acknowledge that New York State was one of the first states to join on to what was then called the Food Stamp Nutrition Education Program, or FSNEP, maybe something that people are familiar with. And then I'm going to fast forward us to 2008, where the Farm Bill really strengthened SNAP-Ed. It called it SNAP-Ed, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Education Program. Of course, 2010, folks are familiar with the Hunger and Healthy Free Kids Act of 2010, which expanded the scope of SNAP-Ed. So originally it was really just nutrition focused. Some cases people were doing one-on-one education, things along those lines. It really turned into physical activity. And I'm going to use diet-related disease instead of obesity prevention, just because of some of the terminology that we would prefer. And the use of public health approaches and really stepping into policy systems and environmental change. And then you'll see that note down there, the National Nutrition Education and Obesity Prevention Program. In law, that is what we're known as. We are not recognized as SNAP-Ed. So when folks were talking about the federal cuts and things like that, people were getting confused between SNAP-Ed and what some of the congressional leaders may have seen, which we're calling it the National Nutrition Education and Obesity Prevention Grant Program. So I just want to acknowledge that there is a name piece in there that people might be confused with. And then, of course, in 2018, it really solidified that SNAP-Ed is the most robust program across the nation. It did also, in the 2018 Farm Bill, solidify that we needed to work on some stuff, including implementation and evaluation. And since that time, there have been systems set up. There's a national reporting system now that exists, and it's much easier to use than the old system, which many may know as FIPPers. So we've come a long way. Of course, I really appreciate that this was brought up, a bunch of times. COVID. So we really exist, I would say, in SNAP-Ed, a world of pre-COVID and post-COVID. And you talked about it many times on how the food systems and recognizing the need for food systems and the need for food in the community is so important. So you can try doing business as usual, but you really can't, right? You couldn't do it then. And I want to acknowledge that the group of people from SNAP-Ed who challenge and inspire the work change the way we do the work. So I want to really focus on what happened. And so 2021 to 2024, the implementing agencies connected. They became something united. And that is really because of COVID. We couldn't be in our silos doing things in other places all around the state. We had to talk. What are you doing? How are you doing this? What do we need? And because of that, we started to rebrand ourselves. There's a statewide website. We did a social marketing campaign. Educators shared tools and resources. Professional development occurred because they were sharing those tools and resources. We had trauma-informed nutrition education training. We talked about culturally sensitive communities. We also talked about weight-neutral conversations. We went into talking to community members themselves, and I say this jokingly, but also seriously. When's the last time you asked a community member what they thought of your website? When's the last time you asked a community member, can they access the things that you're trying to have them access? Most of the times it's not. We did that 2 and 3 times. We asked them about our website. We asked them about texting. We asked them about our branding. We wanted to elevate their voice. And in doing so, it improved the way we communicated. So, and I'll share some of the technology pieces that are there. Connecting us across the state helped us expand and deepen our PSC, our policy systems, and environmental change work. If you're familiar with the schools, we've held for 5 years in a row, we've held the School Wellness Symposium, which brings schools together across the state, bringing up the champions that talk about how important food, nutrition, and movement are to education. And last but not least, of course, over the last 4 or 5 years, New York State has been on the national stage. We have presented at every national conference since 2021, sharing our best practices and oftentimes helping to plan the conference. So I want to acknowledge how far New York has come over the last few years specifically. So I'm going to take us now to 2024, and I'm going to start with this big screen here. Simply stated, SNAP-Ed works. Okay, there was a lot of question on duplication, that it didn't work. There was no information behind it. I'm going to show you some quick images of some of our just one-page state reports. In 2024, you can see 217,000 plus New Yorkers were reached, and that's just in our direct education. That's our nutrition sessions. Really important to note is that's in over 1,000 different community sites. We are going to where people are. We are going to where people live, work, worship, wherever they are. We are going there. We are going to them. And of course, you can see the actual data showing you that nutrition education does work. We are seeing changes in behavior, and people are telling us how they are improving that. I also want to acknowledge something that people often forget about. They often think about our laying the groundwork is nutrition education. That is what we were based in. But we do more than that. We build healthy communities. We try and create sustainable environments. And that you can see 758,000 New Yorkers. And again, I'm going to shout out all these community partners because we have learned and we appreciate, we don't do this in a silo at all. You can't do nutrition education. You can't change food systems in a silo. So you can see some of our different community level interventions that are noted there. I can talk for days about the success stories and the wonderful things that are happening. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment when we talk about what the impact of the loss will be. But I do want to just acknowledge all of the different tools and resources, websites from an online learning platform to social media, and all of the places where we are reaching folks, again, when we can be reached during a normal time frame or when they need to reach something, recipes, information, they can do all of that on their own, assuming they have access to the technology. So, 2024, we were like, we are cruising, this ride is good, our road trip is fantastic, it's wonderful. We get into 2025, here's our allocation that was shared. Lauren was sharing some of the information. I want to just explain a breakdown a little bit. So here in New York State OTDA is our state agency. They hold the contracts with the contract with the federal government, and then they do an RFP process. In 2025, we were stepping into we had just finished our first year, or finishing now, our first year of that 5-year process. 17 community-based implementing agencies. I heard City Harvest noted before. 10 are cooperative extension offices, traditionally covering more of the upstate and Long Island space. And then we have 17 community agencies in there. You have Brighter Bites, Bronx Works, Children's Aid, City Harvest, Common Threads, Food Bank New York City, and Common Pantry. We all work collaboratively together. We as managers meet twice a month to talk about what's going on, to talk about the things that are needed, to talk about what our educators need. Our educational teams meet once a month. They get together, over 100 of them every month, and talk and say and explain what's happening in their communities and let us know what resources they need. And this includes the 3 state agencies. So between the 17 community-based implementing agencies, that's about 200 employees, 200 FTEs, I should say. So 200 full-time equivalents receive SNAP-Ed dollars for their work. In the state agencies, I don't have those exact numbers, but I do want to recognize that oftentimes they go by sometimes like a slightly different name, but Eat Well, Play Hard, Just Say Yes, and Creating Healthy Schools and Communities all receive SNAP-Ed dollars. The New York State Office for the Aging for one of their nutrition programs, and then New York State Ag and Markets, which is how I get to work so intimately with Kendall and team through their community gardening programs. So yeah, about that road trip, it turned into a roller coaster. And May 13th, actually at our first in-person conference in 5 years, we got the news that the House had entirely removed SNAP-Ed from the budget. July 4th, as we all know, the bill was signed, ending us yesterday, September 30th. We were in a limbo for a while. August 13th, FNS released a memo that unexpended funds can be used into what we're in now, fiscal year 26. And then you can see kind of the range of dates there. OTDA was in conversation back and forth about a lot of things. And so we got budget letters. They updated the time frame and allowed for agencies to have carry-in. So what does that mean ultimately right now is federal funding has ended as of September 30th, 2025. We're in a wind down space. We're going to continue supporting programs with the community, for the community, with the resources and staff we have. Programming across New York State will look different. Every one of those 17 implementing agencies and state agencies, due to the dynamics, have lost staff, have lost tools and resources because of that. So things will not look the same. So there's not really a FBRX won't exist anymore, or nutrition education won't exist anymore. It's really going to depend on region by region and area by area. But we want to let folks know we are maintaining as best we can the programming, and really are committed to educating, supporting and strengthening efforts around food, nutrition, and movement. So how do we look ahead? And I want to emphasize this, the loss of SNAP Ed isn't just about nutrition costs going away. It is years, years of a network of people and partnerships to create healthy systems and programs. And what do I mean by that? I want to just show you that the impact of loss kind of step by step using the sociological model briefly. Individual, okay, nutrition classes, that's the core, right? But what are we out thinking about? Who are these individuals as people? What are their social networks? What are their cultural norms? How do they know how to cook? Do they know how to cook? And what are their practices? And of course, organizational, I loved all the mentioning of farm to school, all of those pieces, the double up bucks, all of those things. So schools are one of our largest partnerships, workplaces, healthcare settings, medical sector, places that have food environments and food policy. We are working in those places. So this is, again, we're not just talking about an individual level, we're going up the spheres, if you would. And community. So we talk about, give a man a fish, teach a man to fish. SNAP Ed has been able to look and say, all right, we're teaching you how to fish, but can you fish in that water? Do you have a fishing pole? What kind of bait are you using? Can you cook? Right? We turn into do you have a microwave, or do you just have hot pot? Right? And we joke around. We talk about, we have a wonderful gleaning program in Orange County, and we always joke about butternut squash. And we're like, yes, that stuff can last forever. It's fantastic. But it's not nutritious until it's consumed. And what person without a sharp knife and some sort of heating device can actually consume butternut squash? You can't. Something has to be changed in, or we have to teach people how to use it and how to cook it. And that's what SNAP Ed does. And we use our partners to help us to recognize the things that are needed. And last but not least, you are all talking about this very big picture. I heard, Mitch and Joel and speaking of SNAP and policy and all of that stuff, food labeling, we talk about things, ag policy, all of this falls and affects the work that SNAP Ed does. And we try to stay connected to all of that so we can support our community members. Because when it's happening up here, you don't realize how it's affecting folks on the ground in their day-to-day life. And that's really what the SNAP Ed team is responsible for doing. So we're trying to keep programming up and running. Oh, I know, it's telling me I should go faster. We're trying to keep programming supports as long as we can, but it's hard, it's tough, it's very challenging. We are searching for funding for a multi-level nutrition, food, and movement intervention for statewide, regional, or county by county. We want to fill the piggy banks. We don't lose all this infrastructure that has been created and all these relationships that have been built. So really, what is next? Where do we go from here? What can be reimagined? We don't have to be SNAP Ed, but we also don't want to lose all the tools and resources that SNAP Ed has built and the community relationships that SNAP Ed is able to handle. How do we preserve that knowledge, that infrastructure, again, the relationships? What really I kind of feel is like the phrase I keep using is what can be built on the shoulders of SNAP Ed. So with that, I'll just conclude with, I've seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, and I consider SNAP Ed to be a giant. So with that, I want to thank you for riding along. Here's all my contact information. Please go ahead and check out all of our digital resources, and I welcome any comments or questions. I don't know how I did on time, but I think I was all right.
Thank you so much, Shana. This is a really good overview and really ties in nicely with the Food as Medicine work group. And I think I'd love to open it up for discussion for a few minutes, and then we'll take a short break to come back to the other work groups. Any thoughts on early recommendations? I see someone raising their hand. I can't see who it is.
It's me, Susan. First, I just want to say how fabulous SNAP-Ed has been and the amazing programs that have been created during SNAP-Ed. And I even want to say during COVID, we were able to, when the governor's office would make requests, we were able through SNAP-Ed to make transitions very quickly and get things happening to get people fed. So it's an amazing program and it's really sad. So I guess I would ask in a way, there's a contradiction where SNAP-Ed is really making America healthy again, right? And stuff. So is there a way, I mean, it's not, again, like the farmers, you know, they have all the soybean, but we're giving money to Argentina. Same exact thing here. Is there a way to start to frame SNAP-Ed, not so much through the program of food insecurity or whatever, but through making America healthy again, that we can't make people healthy unless we teach them how to cook and make sure they have the supplies to cook. And so I guess it's a bigger question. We're not going to solve here, but maybe this is the angle we need to start talking to our congressional people about, that the work being done is just too important. We can't lose it. So let's just move it into a acceptable area that the new moron at the top accepts versus, you know, taking it out of here because it feeds poor people. You know what, you know, again, a questioning of why this is so important in political terms that are understood.
Yeah, to just give my own, you know, if you've read the MAHA reports and all of the stuff that comes out, it has a lot of wording I would say many people agree with, but the actions that are taken to handle what they're identifying as the challenges is probably not the same as we would envision it, like what we're saying and what we're doing. So there's definitely, you know, if funding comes out and there's a possibility and agencies would like to do that, or if it comes out through the federal government and it comes to New York State, again, I'm not sure what all that will look like.
I get more from a advocate perspective. We have a lot of advocates here, you know, who are always looking to sort of say, help us understand what we need to, you know, like that was a question that was brought up by Joel and Mitch and everybody at the beginning. Help us understand how we need to lobby the state when it comes to how the state's going to spend the money, you know, for SNAP, basically. The same exact thing, like starting to position how we can get our advocates to lobby their congressional people, you know, to say we can't lose the benefits of SNAP. Could we do this?
Yeah,
You know,
so,
I think that's something we should be thinking about.
yeah. So at a national level, there is a National Association of SNAP Administrators that is doing that,
Okay.
and that has been having conversations. They were having conversations from the moment May 13th hit till now. At the state level, there is groups who are allowed to do that. That's not my space. I can't do that. But we have already had conversations with different folks at the governor's office, and are continuing to work with local assembly members and legislators and really just having those conversations and emphasizing we're kind of the back of the house oftentimes. Like the fun stuff is what you see, the nutrition ed, and that's valuable and that's like heartwarming in that moment. But the other pieces, when you look at that socio-ecological model, are the pieces that people don't think about, that when we step away, the connecting between, you know, the wonderful cold storage at Christ Farms to preserve the gleaned apples that then were brought to the Middletown City School District, where the food service there turned that into applesauce, then served that to students. And then we educated students and gave them the same recipe that they could take home to their families so that they could, like, right, that comes full circle. And those are the things that really creates the sustainable environment. We just had something else, a similar program happened with our BOCES. So I think it's recognizing that SNAP-Ed plays that role and that we do, like you mentioned, think through those things. So there are conversations absolutely happening now, and whatever ways folks would want to engage, including more conversations, would welcome that. There are some of our partner agencies who have advocacy legs and government affairs teams, and Extension and Cornell as well. So
we have two wonderful advocates attending virtually who have their hands raised. Joel first, and then Mitch, you have some comments? Bill, do you want to make a comment? I see your hand raised.
Joel, you calling me? Yes. First of all, I say I think it's really important to understand that anything good in the MAHA report was contradicted by their actual policies. They called for allowing more schools to get local produce from farms. They eliminated the program to do that. They called for expanding the WIC program and strengthening the WIC program. The House Republicans are trying to slash funding for the WIC program. And they called for expanding nutrition education in America. And they, as we heard, ended the single program in America that funds most nutrition education. So watch their hands, not their lips, number one. And number two, I would caution about applying the teach a man to fish analogy, to what people are eating, to consider that the pond may have a electrified fence around it. There may be a fee to get into the pond that's unaffordable. There may be pollution in the pond that kills all the fish. And so we've done extensive focus group on low-income people, particularly in the Bronx, and extensive interviews with low-income people and surveys. And over and over again, they tell us the top reason they're not eating more healthily isn't that they don't know that kale is healthier than soda. It's that they can't afford healthier food. Healthier food doesn't exist in their neighborhoods, or healthier food takes a lot more time to prepare when they're working 2 or 3 jobs. So we are creating a nutrition and education curriculum based on their input, but I think it's really important not to, I'm not saying people here are, but implicitly blame the victim. Oh, well, if they only knew better, there wouldn't be food insecurity for, over 2 million New York State residents or 47 million Americans. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Mitch, I think you had some comments as well.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I guess I have a question. Well, I will make a comment that FoodLink has been recipients of SNAP Ed programs in different ways for a decade plus, and I very much agree with so much of the presentation. And though I agree with Joel too about the danger of the teach a man to fish allegory, I also think it's incredibly important for places like the Rochester Public Market, for example, to have someone doing cooking demonstrations on a regular basis so people can kind of check in, check out, learn some things. It's incredibly vital. And I don't think it's as expensive as it needs to be or has been in the past. But that's besides the point. The question that I have ultimately is when you talk about there's a search for funding, is that an indication that you're searching for funding from the federal government? You're searching for funding from private sources? You're searching for buckets within the state budget where you could allocate money to do some of this work? I'm curious what looking for funding means if you're a state agency.
So I'm not a state agency, so I can only speak, I'll speak to the community-based agencies.
You're only speaking on behalf of your individual program
I'll speak on behalf of the community agencies, so the 17 agencies that are coming together to search. The state agencies, I can't speak for them as they have different parameters that they have to follow. But yes, we have approached to see if in the governor's budget, looking ahead, that there could be space there. But then individually, agencies are looking if they can find funding regionally or county by county to keep nutrition education alive. So it really, we do have a group of folks that are working together as a unit to keep that infrastructure, that statewide infrastructure. But if that cannot be kept, folks are looking individually as well. I cannot speak to New York State Department of Health, OTDA, Ag and Markets, Office for the Aging.
Is there anyone from the state who can answer? I mean, I know the state's been very clear with us about the JSY contract and what's happening there, and I've very much appreciated the communication from DOH. But is there an attempt to look for how to maintain a program like JSY using private sources? I would imagine that there are foundations that are statewide that are really interested in this work and would be much more compelled by the state putting forward an application than by individual agencies doing it.
I can speak to that. I was just at the New Jersey Food Security Summit, and colleagues from Connecticut and Massachusetts were there sharing ideas. There's actually a Northeast region call of state representatives that will be joining soon. And New Jersey actually has partnered with 25 food funders throughout the state to work in parallel with an executive level office of the food security advocate. And they actually grant funds in a coordinated manner to address food system issues. Some of those funders have reached out acknowledging the conference was just on Monday. So I'm still following up on those connections, but I think there really is a good possibility there. And it's something that I'll be following up with colleagues in neighboring states. Any other updates internally in the room at TNB? I see Commissioner.
Yeah.
And I think Jerome had a comment afterwards as well. So I just don't want to lose that after you're done.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's an important insight that you shared, what Jersey's doing. But I don't want us to give up on the federal side either. I mean, the Maha report is full of heartburn. It's full of irony. You know, Joel pointed out a lot of that. But we do know at the same time at USDA, they're looking at programs like LFPA and rebranding that and making that their program, not somebody else's program. There is tremendous power at USDA from Robert F. Kennedy. His things are important to the Secretary of Agriculture, and they're talking a lot together. So the opportunity with vegetables, Make America Healthy Again, it may take rewriting. I would love to see this work group kind of sanitize, be creative, come up with different words to sell this idea. And I think we can sell that idea because it's being asked of the state departments of ag, what we think about it. So I think at the state level, something can be done, but I also think at the federal level, something can be done. So I don't want to give up on that because I think they're going to want to try to rebrand lots of things.
Understood. That makes sense, Commissioner. I also hope that state agencies, I mean, I know JSY is DOH and not Ag and Markets, but I'd hope that state agencies are also looking at some private sources, or if not looking at private sources, making sure to communicate to agencies like ours that they're not looking for them so that we can start to have those conversations. Because the JSY program itself, kind of embedded in food banks, having nutrition educators, I think is really compelling and meaningful. And it'd be good to understand what the state's vision for that is come, the next fiscal year. I'll get off my soapbox.
Just note that our team, we have 3 people recording notes here at the very least. And so these items that are being brought up, will definitely organize the notes and dig deeper into them. So really appreciate you elevating these comments. All right, so we're at 11:51. I think if we
Kate, we have
Jerome, and then I have a quick.
I'm just just setting the stage here for what's next, right? So if we can at 11:55 take a break. I think we have Jerome and Susan I see that had comments before we take a break. And Jerome, do you want to go next? I think you were waiting.
Yeah, sure. So I think most of my SNAP-Ed questions were answered, but just to name that City Harvest, we provide over 1,000 SNAP-Ed activities a year. That allows us to employ 10.5 nutritionists. So it's a real critical service that we're able to provide. And it's, in terms of scientific-based evidence, is single-handedly our strongest program. We're really able to track outcomes and survey folks to see how they're increasing vegetable consumption. So really important, I think, for all food banks and many other of those 13 agencies that rely on it. I wanted to take a step back to the food as medicine presentation, and when I hear food as medicine, the first thing that comes to my mind are the 1115 waivers and how, we're kind of staring down at 2027 as a key year for when that expires. So I was curious if that work group is having conversations about what happens at that point. I know a lot of waivers are being exhausted, and how do some of the conversations around Medicaid or OBA or HR1 kind of factor into the future of those waivers after 2027?
Yes, is the answer. Those conversations are being had.
Okay.
Susan, did you have a reply on that?
Alex can answer something first.
They're saying in regards to aligning with Commissioner Ball and the way New York State Department of Health Office of Health Insurance Programs is looking at that, is that we are also looking to leverage the understanding of the federal government wanting individuals to consume healthier items and healthier food. And when we are moving forward and writing the extension of the waiver, we are leveraging that. And so we are moving forward, writing the next iteration of the waiver, and hoping that all moves forward. But again,
understanding that the waiver is a demonstration and ideally the MCOs, the managed care organizations and the insurance companies, we provide enough evidence during this waiver demonstration to show the insurance companies and the managed care organizations that this does work and that they can move it into their systems as well. So kind of a work on it.
Great question.
Then I just want to, Alita, not to be putting you on the spot or anything, but it's my understanding that we're doing a assessment of all, like putting together all of the SNAP programs and sort of looking at where they're at. So we as a state can have a better sense of how we can maybe try to save some of them or uplift some of them or whatever. I mean, we are doing that work to really understand where we're at and what we could do, right?
Yeah, so we looked at what funding we had remaining and we dispersed those funds to the 17 implementing agencies. And once final claims are submitted for FFY 25, any funds that were left over from each implementing agency's FFY 25 award, they'll be able to maintain those funds to continue operations until September 30th of 26. And same thing for the state partners, any funds that they had left over from FFY 25, they'll be able to use to continue services through September 30th of 2026. So,
If they have the capacity.
yes, it'll all depend on, you know, as Shayna's saying, where they are with staffing, how much funding they have remaining, and what, you know, what programming they can do with what that money is. Bare bones for a lot of them if they, you know, choose to continue.
But are we drilling down to sort of, and maybe it's just too much work at this point because you guys have so much to do, you know, just in terms of like what programs are in place that maybe some way, somehow, through creative thinking, we can sort of keep them going because we're thinking of this resource as opposed to that resource. We were never forced to think that way.
Well, we don't have any money available to us other than what we have left to sort of continue anything unless it gets added to the state budget in the spring. So that's our only hope at this point, between that and any discretionary dollars that might get added to the federal budget, which we know is kind of frozen at this point. So it's all kind of a day by day thing at this point.
Thanks for sharing that update, Alita. Also just want to acknowledge in the chat, Commissioner DeCohen has shared a resource for veterans, and we'll circulate any resources that are shared in the chat or with Ashmita in the room at 10B following the meeting. So let's take a short break if we can aim to like realistically start back up at 12:05. Folks can get some water, stretch your legs, and use the restroom if needed, and then come back at 12:05. Thanks everybody for the discussion so far. All right, 2-minute warning, and we'll get started. 12:05.
Okay. Sorry. It's a breakdown. That's the thought that I was like,
All right, students, take your seats. Class is about to restart.
Is your real name Ellie or is it Ellie? Okay, so my name is also.
So, I mean, but really, everyone knows me. So it's just like one,
Yeah.
you know, run on, whatever.
Ashmita, we almost have everybody back in the room there in Albany. I'm gonna unmute.
Can we all sit down, please?
Oh, okay. Everybody's different time.
You have a good projection voice. I like to stay on time.
Who was that, Ellie?
No, it's 18.
That's why I was like, I'm like, I.
Thank you. Huzzah.
This is why we'll see. I was like, why do I keep it? And I'm like, why? That's why. I'll have to tell Kathleen.
together for the 11-year team labor.
And then she opens the door. That's how I was. She gets. Like I actually. Before you meet someone and you're in that place, it's like, I don't know what I was expecting. Exactly, yes.
Okay, ready to get back into business?
She's not.
She was close. Commissioner Ellie back in the room.
Yeah,
but I get stay
Yeah, great question.
I'll see.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Hey.
the marquee there.
Oh my God, I saw that. I know.
That was like.
I have to show you that.
Okay. get started again with our Food Assistance Network Work Group. Natasha, you're there. Just wave to me. I just want to make sure you're back at the table. Okay, great.
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Natasha, I'll hand it off to you to go over the accomplishments for the Food Assistance Networks, and then we'll have a presentation about the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, from Nick Barber in Office of General Services. Go ahead,
Great,
Natasha.
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Pernica, and the Food Assistance Network work groups goal is to strengthen connections between supply chains and organizations helping people in need. So you kind of understand our framework. We are tasked with facilitating the building of infrastructure, including but not limited to aggregation, processing, storage, packaging, distribution, and marketing facilities, supporting and expanding programs that recruit, train, and provide technical assistance to supply chain partners, and facilitating the use of public lands to grow local food products. And I think this, this is important to, I've been appreciating the historical references that people have been giving in their presentations. And I think this is important in our food assistance network as well, as far as the logistical support side. And just for a frame of reference, because I've been having a lot of conversations about people saying, well, community needs to go back to taking care of community, right? If we can't look to federal level, and, I echo everyone's point that SNAP is the #1 anti-hunger program. Food pantries fill in gaps, but we can't fill in what goes away from federal. But if you look historically at what would going back look like for charitable food system with community helping community in the late 1970s, the food pantries for the Capital District was born out of capital area council of churches, because how we used to do things in the 70s is that people would go from church pantry to church pantry. You kind of get what you got. And we organized it because the pantries needed help coordinating services because the need was greater than they had the resources for. And we also, when I was looking at our own historical documents, we had challenges finding warehouses to accept the government food shipments. We didn't have warehouses big enough to handle and distribute the government food shipments. And so in the early 80s is when our regional food bank here was formed, right? To be able to handle mass quantities of food to supplement what we were doing with just community helping community. So that's what it means kind of in our sector. And when I look at this room today, and I want to really commend Department of Agriculture for convening this really wonderful group of stakeholders, because it really is community, it's our public, it's private, it's nonprofits and for-profits along with government. And honestly, this meeting today is giving me a lot of hope about what we can continue to accomplish by coming together. But we in the Food Assistance Network have been dealing with logistical challenges since the early days. And that's where, government and nonprofit and private has come together to support the solutions to fill in the gaps, basically from SNAPs and other federal policy failures that creates this need to rely on the charitable food system. So, and I just, yes, things are continuing to increase. Last year was a very large increase for charitable food system. I have the best data from Capital Region, but when you compare year to date over last year, we're 5% above, on top of over 40% increase last year. So while the increase isn't as huge, we're still continuing to see increased demand. So talking about the kind of the successes, and I'm going to look at this from a couple of our activities that was in last year's report. Number 12 was optimize partnerships with food banks, food pantries, and food policy councils to streamline communications. And it was specifically about state programs and funding, which I believe, there has been increased communications, but really this optimizing the partnership piece really goes well beyond, because going back to community, nonprofit, for-profit, and government working together to really advance. There's been a lot of work on food policy councils across the state, local and regional food policy councils convening to organize themselves. And so I wanted to really give a shout out to everybody who's been working specifically in the food policy council area. Also, I want to give a shout out to the food banks, food pantries, other food advocates. I have never seen a more coordinated and organized advocacy platform here in New York State of anti-hunger organizations coming together on a consensus-driven advocacy platform. And while here in this particular meeting, we recognize not everybody here can advocate, but this document gives us some really great information that we can take to help put pressure on making positive changes. So I wanted to shout out that. The other thing I wanted to mention was in relation to combining multi-source survey data to identify critical issues within the food assistance network and integrate this information in forthcoming council reports. Just asset mapping and collecting data, right? And I think today was a really great opportunity to hear, really asset mapping, the state agencies. And if you look in our report from 2024, it lists a lot of state agencies and departments that are working and initiatives. And then in this specific work group, we're looking at additional data so that we can help inform everybody who's working collectively. Again, there is definitely state support for this, as well as private and nonprofit efforts working together collectively. So I think, and I also want to give a shout out to myself. No, I'm kind of joking, but I'm not, because I'm a representative of a nonprofit. And so our nonprofit is volunteering my time to be here. So I'm kind of joking, but kind of not. And it's not just about me. Everyone here who is taking time away from their farm, their business, their regular day nonprofit work, and then all of you, from different state agencies, this really is a voluntary, in a lot of ways, effort. There's not a lot of huge funding behind supporting this, but I feel like there's some great momentum on how do we build out and continue to amplify and leverage this council. And Kate had mentioned early the convening in New Jersey about, New Jersey has an executive level anti-hunger advocate that's actually a state funded role. How do we continue to build? There's a lot of efforts to. Oops. Oh, sorry. So I just continuing to build on this collaboration is very inspiring today. So I just wanted to say that. But really, there's a lot of other efforts that are happening to strengthen DEC, is continuing to support logistical and infrastructure needs, a lot of different programs and different agencies. Let me just see if I missed anything that I wanted to make sure to call out today. So I got really excited and started talking about myself. Okay. But yeah, I definitely want to, note that SNAP is huge in this, but also, the efforts to continue to build up the logistical piece so that we can build a local resilient food system and build off of our assets in New York State is critical. And really looking forward to people who are participating here in the room, but online. If someone has an interest in our particular area of the food assistance networks, please reach out to me or Kate, because we do want as many stakeholders involved in helping inform the recommendations. And so expertise is very appreciated in our work group. All right, thank you. That's what I got.
Thanks, Natasha. So continuing on the theme of having accurate foundational knowledge and acknowledging history, we are going to have a presentation from Nick Barber from OGS on the TFAP program and what is currently happening there. So take it away.
Thanks, Kate. Can everyone hear me? All right.
Yes.
So I'm Nick Barber, Director of Food Distribution for OGS. So I oversee the USDA Foods in New York State. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Natasha, for allowing me to have this time. Back in May, when the CCC funding was cut, I threw this together and had these conversations with all the CEOs of the food banks that we partner with. And I also was invited through Natasha's group to do this presentation also. So this has been in the mix for a while, and it's just going through the data of USDA Foods in New York State and just kind of resolving the misconception of some of the issues that are occurring, and just show you that USDA has done a pretty good job this year of providing food, especially in New York State. So next slide, please. So just a program background. So the USDA administers 16 nutrition programs. OGS is the state agency which administers the USDA programs. So we oversee the food distribution for the National School Lunch Program, Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, the Summer Food Service Program. We do a reimbursement program called Special Milk, and that's for programs that don't meet the National School Lunch Program, but still administer programs through milk consumption. And we do reimburse daycares, camps for milk. And then we oversee the Food Assistance Program. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, we administer the entire program, so admin and accountability and food. Next slide. So what are USDA Foods? USDA has a dual mission to nourish people in need, support American agriculture by stabilizing pricing in the U.S. markets. All the food is purchased by the USDA from American farmers, dairymen, ranchers, and fishermen, and sent to states to support recipients of federal nutrition programs. As a reminder, USDA Foods are 100% domestic products. Next slide, please. So the TFAP program, it's a federal program that helps supplement the diets of people with low income by providing them the emergency food assistance at no cost. States are provided entitlement, a dollar value, with which USDA will purchase foods based on New York State's fair share of the TFAP program. New York State has agreements with 8 regional food banks to administer the TFAP program throughout the state. Food banks then distribute USDA foods to their network of around 2,800 food pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters. Next slide, please. So just to clear this up a little bit, so there's 2 types of bonuses that occurred. The Section 32 bonus, and that is a permanent appropriation, which accounts for, it allocates 30% of the annual custom receipts to fund these efforts. So 30% of all incoming tariffs, and it's a year lag. So all the tariffs collected this year we'll see in a future year. So it's a year lag, but it is written in law. So 30% of all the tariffs. It doesn't just support the TFAP program, but it also supports the National School Lunch Program. So there is funding that does come in outside of the irregular appropriations with the Farm Bill. So the Section 32 is a great asset, and it does put a lot of food into New York State. The CCC program, which did end in 2025, this was a discretionary funding, and when it did end, while we were expecting some food, at the same time that they canceled the CCC program, they released Section 32 bonus. So at this time that this occurred, when the CCC was cut, New York State was expecting, I believe it was like 135 truckloads of food, and then that was canceled. But in the Section 32 bonus at the same time, we received 235 truckloads of food. So there is these programs that do supplement. So just understanding the difference between the appropriation and the discretionary funding was, you know, I just learned it, and, you know, understanding it and communicating it is really the asset that we're moving towards. Next slide, please. So New York State, we utilize the OTDA data for the SNAP participations by county. And that's how we determine our fair share to the food banks. The food bank's fair share is based on the average numbers of persons served by that agency. TFAP USDA Foods, including entitlement bonus and CCC, is a supplemental program, and it only represents 25% of the food at the food banks in New York State. Next slide. As part of the Code of Federal Regulations, there is a expectation and a requirement for the state to develop a means to ensure that the food is for the eligibility. We do two methods. It can be categorical eligibility or household income. In New York State, it is set at or below 225% of the poverty level, or the categorical eligibility, SNAP, WIC, TANF, Medicaid, and SSI. Those ones already meet that level, so you can select either. We do make this process as least burdensome as possible. The attestation only needs to be filled out one time a year for that family. And then upon distribution, it should be, has anything changed in your eligibility? And if there has been, they should reattest to the attestation. The attestation just has simple, a name, a zip code, the total household members. Do you meet? Do you attest that it's accurate? You don't even need to sign, and then you just date it, and then we have the non-discrimination statement attached to it. We have enhanced our model of this. This is a paper form, and then we also have 3 approved electronic versions that are stored, and they print out exactly on our form, and we also have a fillable PDF form. So there's definitely ways to reduce paper, reduce burden on this with the eligibility through the attestation. However, it is a requirement by law that we do this. Next slide. So just full transparency, while we're the state distributing agency, we pass down 99.9% of the funding directly to the food banks, and we don't tell them how to spend it. Their entitlement, they choose through the catalog what products they want based on what they have coming in from donations. So they make the decisions. The only time we do step in is if we see perishable things like grapes, maybe a smaller food bank, if they ordered 2 to come in on the same week, we would say, hey, just so you know, you have short amount of time to get this through. Are you sure you could take this? So the food banks themselves choose the products that they want and how they want to spend their money. We only withhold the money to administer the program at the state level. Next slide. So here's the data. So I'm going to take you through this, and Kate, you could just cut me off if I'm getting close on time. But I went through all the data all the way back to 2015, and I wanted to show food banks how the entitlement worked, how the Section 32 bonus worked, and then how cases and everything was bought, and then add in the next layer of all the excess or additional programs that were appointed through the years. So back in 2015, and I won't go through all the data, it's there, but back in 2015, New York State had 18 million in entitlement purchases, and then another 14 million in TFAP Section 32. The average price per case was $13.88. So the program was 32 million in 2015. Based on the SNAP participation, and as we heard earlier, it's roughly 2.9 million in the state. And this is 36 million, so that's the monthly multiplied out by 12. So in 2015, we were able to buy 2.3 million cases of food. And if we look at 2024 was the last full year, and then the 2025 data, and this is just the base program. In 2024, we were at $22 million of entitlement purchases. 52 million of Section 32. The price of food has gone up. We all know it's $28 a case. So in 2015, it was 32 million. In 2024, it was 75 million. But then the next line, as you can see, our SNAP recipients actually went down a little. So we were still able to procure more cases than we were in 2015, or relatively the same amount. But the money increased based on the pricing of the product. So as the base program in the data and where we pull everything from and how we administer our split of the overall funding, as the base program, USDA did a really good job taking in price consideration, assigning dollars, and we kind of stayed stagnant based on all the data. The caveat was 2020. That was coming into the COVID and the trade mitigation year. They didn't give as much money as the entitlement. They put that all into the trade mitigation portion of it. So in the next slide or two, we'll go through that. Next slide. So in this slide, this will show you all the additional programs. So same thing. In 2015, total base program was 32 million. There wasn't total TFAP with additional, there wasn't the additional in 2015. In 2024, the base program was 75 million, and then with all the additional, we were at 136 million. But once again, the SNAP participations and how we do their fair share across the state really hasn't changed. So in 2015, we bought the 2.3 million cases. In 2024, we bought 2.6 million with the base program, but with all the additional stuff, we got 4.8 million cases. So that's just showing that, you know, the base program as written in law that we know and we run and we administer, those programs are really, really doing a good job with keeping up with the times based on the data and how we receive it. The additional programs, you know, those are additional programs. Those are discretionary funding, and you can't always count on those. As you can see, things happen, whatever the situation is. But those are just the additional things. And I always tell my boss, you know, it doesn't matter if we receive 1 truck or 1,000 trucks. Our job is to administer it by the program, and we're going to make sure that those food banks and schools receive 100% yield of whatever we are allotted and we receive. So in whole, while we did receive that significant increase in 2025, based on all the data, USDA did a truly wonderful job of keeping it static through the years. Next slide. So this slide here, this kind of just shows down where that cursor is, New York State total of TFAP. So the New York State, or the federal government way of splitting it is a 60-40% of the poverty index and the unemployment index. And that gives out our fair share in New York State. So out of the entire pot of money, anytime there's a split in these programs to assign money to New York State, we roughly receive, in 2015, it was about 6.17%, and now we're up to 6.46% of the total pot. Next slide. Oh, go back to that slide for a second. I want to show. So this slide here, this shows the breakdown. So in 2023, back to 2018, those other bonus programs, those were the Trade Mitigation, CARES Act, FFCRA, COSA, Build Back Better. So those are all the discretionary funding that was assigned to the program. And then in 2023, there was 3 rounds of the CCC. There was in 2023, 2024, and then 2025, we did receive about $8 million worth of product from that before it was canceled. So that's where you see that in there. But as far as Section 32 bonuses go, up to current through August 2025, we've already received $47 million worth of TFAP Section 32 product, and there is, a big push. I forget the dollar value, but Secretary Rollins did commit, I think, 351 million into TFAP Section 32 for the remainder of this year. So what we're still waiting on that. Fast forward to the news of today with closing of the shutdown of the government. I don't have a slide for this, but I will communicate this out that so with the shutdown of the government, any truckloads that have been purchased will still remain in the queue and still be received. Any product that is not out for solicitation or purchase will not be received until a continuing resolution or budget is passed. So just totals, as far as TFAP goes, we do have 1.2 million cases of product that is in purchase status, so we will still receive those. 1 million of them are expected between October 1st and January 31st, and then another 156,000 between February and June. There is still 312,000 cases that are in queue that will eventually go in once the government reopens. As far as administrative funding on the TFAP side, September will be paid out because any funds that were in our account we can still pay. But admin funding beginning October 1st forward, we will not receive that until the government is back open and levels are established. And then once that happens, the food banks will submit their claims and we will reimburse them for that. So as of right now, it's kind of business as usual until we get kind of some resolution. We do have USDA contact information on, if there's issues or what needs to happen throughout the next couple weeks or months, however long this takes. But we do have contacts of the essential employees that are still in employment and not furloughed, so that any issues with loads or trucks or anything that we need questions on, we do have a direct line to contact people. So as far as TFAP in New York State, we are very confident that we are going to maintain through this next couple months until we find out where the direction is going to head. But all in all, USDA, we can't say enough about their partnership and their ability to, see the need, see the change, and provide what we need to meet those levels based on the data. And I think that's all I got, Kate.
Thanks, Nick. We'll be continuing to arrange meetings just to help the food assistance networks understand what resources are available, and even if things are changing, to know what the existing guidance is. So just to note, there's a lot of figures on the slides. We will be circulating the slides. Those will be available up on the New York State Council on Hunger and Food Policy website following the meeting. So if you want to refer back to any of the presenter materials, you could just go onto the website. We're running a little bit short on time, but just wanted to highlight some of the key points that kind of rose to the top for recommendations. Collecting and coordinating data, continuing our partnerships with food policy councils to really engage the folks that are doing the boots on the ground work in their communities and understanding what's needed, pursuing potential other funding sources, and how we could centralize data collection to reinforce removal of the household food security survey. Any other just near-term suggestions? We can unmute in Albany too. Okay, hearing none. Is there? Okay.
Yeah, this is Christine Aldred with New York State DEC. So we come in on the New York State food donation, food scraps recycling law. I think I shared in a previous meeting that the law right now is focused on like the largest businesses across the state, but we are going to be expanding that law. So it's going to go from 2 tons per week. So that doesn't mean much to people, but that's like our universities, colleges, large scale grocery stores, larger chain restaurants, and it's going to branch it down to 1 ton per week in 2027 and then a 1/2 ton per week in 2029. So this is going to bring and push a lot more food into the system. So I think from our perspective of just educating us is what's kind of needed on the infrastructure side in terms of funding for food banks or for emergency relief organizations, emergency food relief organizations, what those needs really are as this law is going to expand, if there's resources that they need as the law is going to expand, especially around food safety, because we might be moving more into prepared foods now. Those are all conversations that we're having. There's a lot more behind all of that, but just to keep it short and concise, definitely looking for input, both from the council and this work group on just things that we should consider as this law continues to expand over the coming years.
Thanks, Christine. And that's a good reminder that we have been trying to keep up with a monthly email to the council members, affiliates, and partners. If there are resources that you want to share, you can put them in the chat, email me or Kendall, or Ashmita in the room there in Albany can take information, and we'll keep circulating that. All right. Any other comments before we move to food access programs? Okay, Krista.
All right, thank you, Kate. I'm going to be super brief. I'm really eager to hear from Liz, and I know we're short on time. In terms of the accomplishments, there were just a couple of pieces I wanted to highlight that I think are instructive as we think of our recommendations in this especially challenging year. Of course, the recommendation that I think we're most proud of that our work group elevated last year that has come to fruition is the implementation of universal school meals, the historic step forward. And as I was reflecting on this meeting, I was just especially proud that our work group in this council has elevated that recommendation for years, even when it seemed like it was politically infeasible. So it's a good reminder, I think, as we develop recommendations for this year, that we have a role in saying what New Yorkers need, whether it feels politically feasible or not. We have the perspective and can bring to our lawmakers, here's what we actually need to move the dial and make a difference for families. The other thing I wanted to note on the Universal School Meals Bill is that it does include a requirement that now schools must conduct outreach for SNAP. That's never been in place before. And I think that's just a good example, in addition to funding the programs and services that people need, there are also ways that the state can leverage existing systems of trusted messengers to make sure that we're communicating with families, especially as these changes are coming about for SNAP. Those direct communications to families from local organizations, schools that they trust are going to be absolutely critical. So I think we should be thinking holistically, both about funding needs, but also how do we identify these low cost, no cost policy changes at the state level that can really make a difference for families. So I'm going to leave it there. I am really humbled to share some time with Liz from the Office for New American Public Youth. Thanks.
I'm old school, so I'm gonna go up to the front. So we're ensuring equity and dignity for New Americans. So I'm going to go over a lot of what we do at the Office for New Americans. It is an interesting time in immigration right now. It's also a very busy time for us. And I just want to recognize that I can't get through all of this in 10 minutes. I will get through my slides. I will not get through all of the questions and concerns that we have right now. So I've tried to highlight and pull what I thought was probably the most applicable and important. I know that there will be a lot of questions. I can share my contact info and email after. I'm happy to talk about these things ad nauseum after and following all of this. So we've been around since about 2012. I'm going to go to the next slide. Thank you. So the New York State Office for New Americans assists all new Americans with accessing and navigating a variety of services for free and supports statewide networks of community-based providers. Go to the next one. So who are new Americans? We've got immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, undocumented individuals, all newcomers who reside in the U.S. So who qualifies for our services? We have 2 qualifications. That you're in New York State We don't care how long. That you are not born in the US. We don't care how you get here. That's the qualifiers. So if you meet those two criteria, amazing, we can help you. Please call our hotline. So many new American families, I just want to note, are mixed status. So what does that mean? It means that mom and dad might have different statuses from each other. They might have different statuses from aunts and uncles and grandparents and kids. And that when you're working with a family, that not all of the children are going to be of the same status. So that's just something that we want to keep in mind when we're looking at benefits and who qualifies for what. I'm going to go to the next slide. So who are new Americans? 23% of our population in New York State of our 19.45 million are new Americans. So we're serving about a quarter of New Yorkers. Go to the next one. So what services do we offer? And why are we here talking about food? So we offer citizenship and civic engagement, so helping people prepare for naturalization, getting waivers for the exam, all those types of things, preparing for becoming citizens. We have services, it says developmental disability services. I'm just going to cover up that because we will help anybody with a disability if they need, although there is a strong focus on people with developmental disabilities, and then within that, children and youth services. English language learning, very important for our new American communities. We help in a variety of different ways. We have in-person and ways to learn over your phone. You can learn English. Immigration legal services, extremely popular right now. Mental health support, probably as popular as our immigration legal services right now. And then we also have workforce development. So what does that look like? We have people that come from all over the world who have talents and skills, and we want to put them to good use. What does that include? We have farm workers that come over. We have people who know how to work in agriculture. We have people who know how to work in STEM, and all of these different fields that apply to agriculture and food systems and supply chain management. I mean, you name it. They just need the skills to apply their degrees and learn the language of that field to apply all of those skills to the challenges that we're facing right now. And so that program is called Professional Pathways. And what we want to do is capture them and use their skills in the problems that we're facing right now. Got wonderful statistics. I won't read through them all. I will let you look at those on your own time. And we're going to move to the next slide. All right, so we have our opportunity centers. That just means that's a consolidation of these services found all throughout New York State. It looks like the workforce referrals, citizenship test prep classes, immigration law consultations. These are just hubs. We will serve anybody anywhere in this map. Let's go to the next one. Thank you. So owner's role in food security for new Americans. Although we don't have a dedicated food nutrition program specifically for new Americans, we're committed to advancing food security in immigrant populations. ONA plays a critical role in advancing and connecting new Americans with locally sourced healthy foods and nutrition programs across the state. We aim to bridge gaps in underserved communities, ensuring that all New York residents have access to nutritious diets while supporting the state's locally grown and produced foods. So we have outreach teams that connect with local food banks and pantry systems to ensure immigrants feel safe accessing those foods and that those foods are culturally appropriate. As you know, we're partnering with Ag and Markets, that's why I'm standing right here right now, to connect with local food systems and create holistic supports for farmers, workers, and consumers who are new Americans. So food insecurity among new Americans. We know that 1 in 10 households experience food insecurity, but we also know that vulnerable populations in New York, especially people of color, immigrants, and households with children, are especially at risk. They face unique barriers reported by the National Immigration Law Center. So we know that our new Americans have what we call compounded barriers to accessing food services. That looks like reporting to federal agencies, questions on forms, understanding them, being able to read the forms, verification processes, language access, fear of being considered a public charge, and confusion with eligibility, which we know is quite prominent. Let's go to the next one. Thank you. So what are the available supports to a majority of our new Americans as we try to navigate who qualifies for what? So the ones that we know are pretty solid right now are the school meals and summer meals that we just heard about. We have WIC. WIC is widely available to new Americans, and it's a good foundation to know that for those who may be out of status, those who are undocumented. There's a really good chart I'm going to get into that talks about all of those things, but that's a solid foundation in the recommendations that we make for programs that qualify for new Americans that they may not know about. We also have summer EBT is a big one as well. Thank you. So we are also on the forget the name of it, the governor's LGBTQ plus task force. And we just want to acknowledge we have a lot of new Americans that come over that are LGBTQ plus, and they face additional compounded barriers in addition to being new Americans. They're coming here because of persecution where they're from because of these identities. And this is just a good example of individuals who are in the new American community and also have other barriers. So we know that their choice is likely to face food insecurity. If you're LGBTQ, your choice is likely to face food insecurity. You compound that on top of being a new American. Trans people have even higher rates at 30%. Religious trauma is a huge piece of this. So individuals may not feel safe going into a place of worship to get foods, like food pantries and things like that, to get those bridge services. Concerns around IDs. And this is within the LGBTQ plus community and also our new American communities. Do they need a piece of mail? Do they need an identity? Is that identity going to be received and understood? Or are they going to face discrimination because of that identity? So these are all things that we would just want to keep in mind. And then I just want to add on to this, we have a big population of deaf new Americans, and that's another kind of good example of those compounded barriers. So in addition to being an immigrant, they are also living with a disability, and how do they navigate these systems with these compounded barriers? And go to the next one. Increasing food security. So we've got some recommendations on how we can do this. They're just tangible examples in addition to other ones that the group has been phenomenal with coming up with. Provide quality language access and document translations so that it can be easily understood. Increase language skills and cultural competency of the staff serving new Americans and their families. And we know within state agencies that OLA offers a really great support with that. We also have Language Line. Support business owners and grocers through the process of accepting WIC and SNAP. So that looks like ethnic grocery stores being reached out to say, hey, do you need assistance going through the process to take WIC and SNAP as a business that has the foods that these communities are consuming? And we also have improved outreach, enrollment, and education initiatives of community and public agencies that serve immigrants to ensure that all immigrants are enrolled in food programs they're eligible for and that they're fully aware of their rights within those programs. So specific examples, supporting pantries and knowing dietary needs of new Americans in that community. So replacing non-halal meats with lentils if you're not able to provide halal meats, or providing rice instead of bread. These seem like kind of obvious examples. And one of the interesting things actually is that I read data that said that replacing meats with lentils and rice instead of bread can actually be more cost effective. Education around growing your own food, including fruits and veggies, similar to what individuals may find where they're from. So going back to our Cornell programs, having that data and research to know that, all right, we can't grow these foods for these families who are from Burma and Nepal, but we can grow these vegetables, which are similar in taste and flavor. How are we connecting individuals with growing their own food and having those crops that they're growing be culturally relevant? Supporting local grocers who offer ethnic foods, sell culturally appropriate foods, water's wet. Develop and launch communication campaigns that highlight the significant contributions of immigrants to the food system and agricultural infrastructure of New York State. I'm gonna go to the next one. Thank you. Federal changes. So we are tracking all of these, and we also have resources for Know Your Rights. There's a whole page for this with links. I will let you browse that on your own time. ONA grantees are also offering legal consultation and family preparedness clinics. This is very important. ONA grantee Know Your Rights events can be found on our webpage. There's the link for that. And then ONA has created a webpage for Know Your Rights information right here. So this is a wealth of resource that has a whole conglomeration of different services that you need to overcome what's going on, get through it, to know what your rights are and how you can be supporting the individuals that you work with. Go to the next slide. So the reason that I didn't want to put a chart in here of who qualifies for what is because when you wake up and go to sleep, it changes. And I was like, by the time I get this out, we're not going to know. So there was someone earlier who talked about new Americans, I believe it was, yes, Jerome. And right now they haven't fully implemented what that's going to look like. It's going to be phased in. Who's going to qualify for every rule, there's an exception. And so the best place to track a lot of that information is going to be here in the New York Immigration Coalition benefits chart. So navigation chart for benefits. This gets updated regularly by our partners at New York Immigration Coalition. So what you can do is you say, I have this individual that came in, what do they qualify for? So you can open this chart. I don't know if it's going to let us click it. Yeah, is there a way to click either one of those, but the middle one and the bottom one for the New York Immigration Coalition? Yeah, that one.
Kendall's going to shift because it's, I think, just sharing the PowerPoint, but we can, why don't you complete your thought and we'll fill it up.
Perfect. So this chart just has a drop down where it's going to say on this side, this is the individual status, this is the benefit, and you're going to tab over and say, all right, they do qualify or they don't qualify for that service. There's perfect. So right here is kind of an example. So emergency Medicaid, we also have New York State Medicaid, we have federal Medicaid, SNAP. So right here, this one is the one that's going to be updated. Well, all of them will be updated. But this is the one that we might want to pay attention to a little bit more in this group. So if you scroll down a little bit, you see refugees and asylees. Currently, it's yes. This piece will need to be updated at some point when that change happens. So you'll be able to pull up this chart, and New York Immigration Coalition is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on what is available for each individual based on their status. And then I'm going to trouble you to go back to the slides. One of the issues that we're facing right now with SNAP that I have kind of been putting the alarm on is even though individuals qualify for SNAP, they may not want to fill out this form. If you've ever seen a SNAP form, it asks for your citizenship status. It asks if there are any non-citizens living in that household, and it asks if you're Hispanic or Latino. I don't know about you. I wouldn't feel comfortable answering any of those questions. And so we have individuals who qualify who are not applying for these things because of how the form itself is designed. There's also a documentation guide for citizens and non-citizen eligibility for health insurance coverage in New York State. So I would give that a browse and all the time that you probably don't have. New York State Office for New Americans, Know Your Rights, Know Your Resources. This is my office. This is a conglomeration of everything that you need to know. It also has resources for agricultural workers and their rights and resources for where they work. It also includes Know Your Rights and Resources in any other workspace, how to report hate and discrimination, knowing your rights around things like Border Patrol. Those are also things that are covered in here and also through New York Immigration Coalition. Protecting immigrant families resources. This is also a place that you're going to find food security information and updates. And so I included this not to be like, you know, hey, these guys are doing my homework for me, but because they are so on top of it and that is all they live and breathe and do, that these organizations are going to be the backbone of finding that information of who qualifies for what, when. And then I think there's maybe another. Yes, so here's our hotline. These are the hours, times, and information that you can find. I also brought with us little palm cards, and I have stickers that reiterate our statement that all are welcome in New York State. And then these are the different ways you can connect with us. And then all of your burning questions, I am here to answer.
Thanks so much, Liz. This is really informative. And just a reminder, we are going to circulate the slides and any events, resources that are shared with us following the meeting. I know I received a message from Andrew Barrett from New York Health Foundation. They have an event coming up that Ag and Markets will be represented at on October 14th in New York City. They're also doing some work on organizing funders around SNAP. So Andrew, just provide us those links and we can circulate it to the group for sure. Any other just ideas to share at this point? I know we will have our work group sessions to zero in on our recommendations, but any other comments now?
Kate, if I could just echo Natasha from earlier had welcomed people to join their work group if they're interested. I would like to put that out there for food access programs as well. We have a lot to talk about in our November meeting and would really welcome expanding that table. So if anybody's interested, please feel free to reach out to me or to Kate.
That's great. And one thing that I was writing down is this meeting is really a springboard, right? Springboard to connection, to understand what our colleagues are doing, how can we work together, and we've created places for that. So we'll circulate the work group meetings as well. I see Commissioner DeCohen, you have your hand up.
Hi, everybody. Happy Wellness Wednesday to everyone. I just wanted to alert you that now at the Department of Veterans Services, we get some areas with the money. Get called out in Hamptons where the wife is the veteran.
Okay.
We're having a
And the
little bit of a connection issue.
husband is or was the millionaire. Can you hear me? Are you hearing me better now?
We're having a little bit of a connection issue. It's kind of cutting in and out. Do you mind just sharing the resources, by email or in the chat? Okay, sorry about that. Any other comments or things to share out? Okay. So again, wanted to say that this meeting is really a springboard for coordination. Knowing the contacts, we do have a list of all of the members and affiliates that are on the website, as well as my contact information and Kendall's. We are going to take some next steps that Kendall will go over, but just a couple announcements that I'm going to be reaching out to our agency appointees to the council to contribute to the report in the same way that we did last year. We want to set the stage in our introduction about the issue of hunger across the United States, the New York stats, and then what New York State agencies are doing. This not only informs the reader, but helps us to stay connected to the work and each other. So think about it. If you're representing an agency, you'll expect an outreach from me to put a small summary into the report for 2025. And before Kendall goes over next steps and we close out, there was a request to do a photo and showcase our partnership. So at the end of the meeting, Ashmita is going to change our online screen to kind of a Brady Bunch scenario, and then folks in the room gather around the screen, and Kelly's going to help to organize that photo. So if you have time to stay on for just a moment and following our agreement, that would be wonderful, and Kendall and I will stay on for sure. Okay, Kendall, you want to go over next steps, and then we'll have closing remarks from Commissioner.
Thank you, Kate, and I'll be very brief. I just want to echo what Krista mentioned, that some members and affiliates join multiple work group calls, and we definitely we support that fully. So I want to share that our next work group meetings are happening in November. I'm going to put all of the dates and times in the chat, but just very quickly, Economic Vitality is meeting Thursday, November 6th at 11 a.m. Food is Medicine is November 7th at 11 a.m. Food Assistance Networks is November 7th at 1 p.m. and Food Access Programs is November 6th at 3 p.m. So if you would like to join any or all of those meetings, please email me and I'll send you the calendar invite. My email is just my first name dot my last name at agriculture.my.gov. And so here's our timeline on the screen of what the next couple months look like for us. So in November, those work groups are going to meet. We're going to review a draft of the 2025 annual report, kind of finalize those recommendations, and also establish a concrete timeline for contributing and providing feedback for that final report. We do want to make sure that it includes all of your thoughts. So we want to involve you in that review process as much as we can. In December, the council members and affiliates, again, are going to collaborate, revise. Final revisions have to happen in December. And then we will submit that report, which will eventually be published by January 30th, 2026. So we look forward to writing the 2025 report for you. And again, just want to thank you for all the terrific work that you've contributed to this council this year. And with that, I will pass it to Commissioner for closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks all. And I'm going to be very brief as well. I would say that this is probably the most weighted agenda that we've ever had. Probably the most passionate agenda, and probably one of the better agendas indeed. So thank you, Kendall. Thank you, Kate, and Kelly, and our team here. You know, the level of uncertainty in the world, in the country, and in New York is so high. And the scope of the challenge when we started this meeting today was pretty big. But I think as we're getting near the end of it, the scope of the challenge is larger. Because we heard more about more things that were outside of our sphere in our particular work groups. If you put it all together, it's pretty significant. So again, this is a room physically and virtually of pretty good minds, creative minds, I think, critical thinkers, and people obviously well qualified to deal with this issue, and we will. So with that, I just want to say, let's stay very close, especially during the next few days, few weeks, see what happens in Washington with this budget. But then let's stay close as we look forward to how we in New York go forward. So thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and energy and passion. Have the best day possible.
Thank you. And so if folks in Albany wouldn't mind just gathering around the screen, and Kelly, you could help to arrange a picture. And then if folks that are online do have just a moment for that, that would be wonderful. Thanks. Thank you all so very much. Okay, stand up and come to the screen. Yeah. So Ashmita, does it look like a lot of squares? Oh, did we lose them in Albany or no?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Wow, no.
we can hear you. Uh-oh.
Maybe she left so that the view looks better on the big screen in Albany.
Okay. Ellie is saying Ashmita is logging back in. For the folks online, if you do have a moment, that's great. And thanks so much for being here if you have to move on with your day. I'm going to end the recording.